It was my first time holding the staff in some time, and I had almost forgotten how heavy it was. Sure, it looked cool, which was nice, but carrying it all the time would have been exhausting. I should have asked Liz to also bring a weight-reducing relic while she was at it. You see, for people like her, even a big metal staff was as good as weightless, so she wouldn't think to bring a weight reducer unless I asked for it.
I had no idea you had a staff relic, sir.
I also have sword relics and axe relics. This is just another part of my collection.
I see. It would be a waste for a relic like that to sit around in a collection, but what a peculiar item that is. Is it true that staff relics have incredible mana conversion, sir?
Yeah, It seemed Magi couldn't help but be fascinated by staves. Chris's eyes darted between Roundworld and her own staff. The sad truth was that mine was more like a big translation device, and hers was actually the superior weapon. Still conscious of Chris's gaze, I looked around and spotted Ketcha contemplatively gazing out the window. The whole reason I had sent Liz back to the Imperial capital was so I could talk to this man. With a hard-boiled grip on my staff, I sauntered over to him. The low-hooded, suspicious shaman turned towards me. "Hey, Kachaka, something caught your eye?" He? Ihu? As always, I couldn't communicate with him. But that was about to change. I activated Roundworld and put on a smile. "Sorry, could you say that one more time?" His utterances were shady, but his eyes were surprisingly calm. Hee.
Hey.
I see. Interesting. Doing my best to keep my face from twitching, I gave him my thanks and walked away. I returned to Chris, who had intently watched the entire exchange.
Ketch is our teammate, so you shouldn't mess with him, sir.
Yeah, but I wasn't messing with him. Man, what a strange world it is. Noticing Chris's obvious confusion, I held out the staff. "For the duration of this job, I'll lend you this."
Huh?
You look like you wanted to try it, am I right? Just be sure not to lose it.
Oh, wow! Do you plan to do this job without a weapon, sir?
Her eyes were wide, directed not at me, but at the mystical staff. I put on a hard-boiled demeanor. "It's fine. My weapon is this. If anything, a staff would get in my way. It's really heavy, so please carry it for me." Baffled, Chris took the staff. She didn't say anything, despite its considerable weight. Even with her tiny frame, she was stronger than me. How depressing.
Even if we are clanmates, I still can't believe that a hunter would lend out their own weapon. But I take it if you insist.
Yeah, thanks a ton. Oh, right. That staff is fairly powerful, so don't test it out inside the airship.
I know that, sir.
Grinning, I glanced over at Kachaka. I hadn't been able to parse a single thing he had said. Apparently, he really was just saying, he. Roundworld didn't work by deciphering the rules of a language, but by understanding intentions, and it was a relic, which meant its powers were absolute. It worked on a similar principle that Tears of Truth used to discern fabrications. Hunters really were nothing but weirdos. Aside from the occasional turbulence, the airship journey was pretty easy. Perfect Vacation probably had something to do with that, but mostly it was because of the lengths Franz had gone to. During those 3 days, he had made sure everything was in order. The passengers had all been checked, and the airship got another inspection. A look at his haggard face was all I needed to know how much work that must have been.
"Not a single rat aboard. So, 1,000 tricks. Do you still think the airship will crash?"
I think it'll be fine. But if it crashes, then it crashes. Where was the emergency exit again?
"Head out and it'll be on your left. Damn it, didn't you receive a map of the ship? Are you trying to get under my skin?"
Oh, that's right. I got a map. Franz was really high-strung. It's not like being on edge would help, and there was no use overthinking matters. "I'm sure everything will be fine. Safety rings protect you from falls. I know this from experience."
"Is this a joke to you?"
Franz slammed the table. I guess he didn't appreciate my comment. I took a step back, and he stepped forward.
"Your job is to prevent that from happening. How can you be so nonchalant? Act like you care about this job.
That's, simply a matter of experience.
What was that?
I had been through all sorts of ordeals. Protecting the Emperor was a first for me, but I had experience with dragon attacks, and also with being yelled at. I also had experience when it came to crashing, and that wasn't even the worst of it. I had a history of misfortune, and knew when to not fight fate. At least this had made me the world's foremost expert in the use of safety rings. But that didn't involve much more than just activating them. I'm sure it'll work out.
This ship is a fortress. It's equipped with monster repellents. Nothing will approach us on land or in the sky.
Franz almost sounded like he was talking to himself. The next moment, a frantic knight burst into the cabin.
Sir, we've received word from the surface. There's signs of a storm forming.
Damn! This wouldn't have happened if we hadn't delayed our departure. Tell everyone to stay alert. Neither wind nor rain, not even lightning, will bring us down.
It seemed silly to get angry at me when storms were just a part of traveling. Just recently, I had been hit by a storm during my vacation. Knitting my brow, I thought back on my previous experiences. I hope it really is just a storm. The airship shook violently. Ketchikaka looked out a window and clenched his teeth when he saw the black clouds. His head and stomach were both suffering stress-induced aches. He had never experienced anything like this since joining Fox. He knew what was causing this. It was the man claiming to be of the 13th tale, Krai Andre. Nothing about him struck Kachaka as impressive. Before and after his identity had been revealed, he came off as flippant, and even the gentlest descriptions couldn't disguise the fact that he was a goof. He simply did what he wanted. Kachaka had never seen someone he at him. Not to mention that man turned the Emperor into a frog and summoned bedsheet elementals. Deep down, Kachaka wasn't sure if he wanted to stay in Nine-Tailed Shadow Fox if this was what their top brass were like. But was that man really one of the top? From the moment the Thousand Tricks claimed to be of the top brass, doubts had swirled in the back of Kachaka's mind. He was certain that Telm was a fellow fox, but he couldn't be sure about the Thousand Tricks. Hexes were a variety of magic that were given form by enmity and other strong emotions. As a user of hexes, Kachaka was very keen at discerning the nature of people. As far as he could tell, the Thousand Tricks was simply, or rather extremely laid back. He wasn't driven by any ill will, but more than that, he didn't have the scent of death that clung to all hunters. But just how could that be? As he watched the large drops of rain rap against the window, Kachaka let out a pitiful hee-hee. His evaluation told him that the Thousand Tricks wasn't a member of Fox, but that same evaluation also insisted that he couldn't possibly be a level 8 hunter. It said he was just a normal person and a weak one at that. Setting aside the matter of whether or not he was a fox, there was no denying that that man was a level 8 hunter. He had wondered if this man was actually a body double, but surely if the Thousand Tricks wanted to do that, he would have picked someone else. Besides, a normal citizen couldn't possibly have known the code signs used by Fox, nor could that have been a coincidence. Nothing fit together. Kachaka had no clue what was true and what was false. Though it was a mind-numbing process, there was an emergency system that foxes could use to confirm a person's membership. Not for his duty, but for his own sake. He planned to make use of it once he got back to the imperial capital. The storm raged outside the airship. This wasn't enough to bring down a vessel like the Black Star, but even still, the interior was abuzz like a beehive. Neither Kachaka nor Telm could control storms. This storm was just a coincidence. While it was an incredibly convenient coincidence for them, it was still just that.
I've heard that the Thousand Tricks can summon storms. Has the time come? Now wouldn't be an odd time to crash.
Kachaka refused to believe someone had summoned this storm. Those sorts of spells existed, but they always had distinct forewarnings. Kachaka hadn't seen any such omen, and that man didn't have any mana to begin with. Normally the shaman would have been able to confidently say this wasn't the result of magic, but they were talking about the Thousand Tricks, someone who was capable of instantly turning the Emperor into a frog. Kachaka let out a weak laugh.
I see you're uncertain, Kesha. Worry not. This vessel's magic defenses will do little against attacks from the inside.
With a magus this powerful at his side, their goal was within reach. In terms of both discretion and power, Telmapocles was the strongest magus Kachaka had ever seen. When it came to anti-personnel combat, he probably even surpassed the Abyssal Inferno. And there was the water clone. By borrowing the power of his relics, Telm had the unique ability of creating a clone that he could control at will. It didn't matter how many guards the Emperor had. Killing him was well within the realm of possibility for Telm. 1 month prior, Telm's words of reassurance might have put Kechachaka at ease. But not anymore. There shouldn't be any problems. Their chances of failure were practically nil, and they could call for dragons if they really needed to. Just then, the 1,000 Tricks entered their cabin. When he saw Telm, he gave that slightly dopey smile of his. Telm began to stand up, but he held out his hands. No need.
So you're saying it's not time yet?
Huh? Oh, Franz said he and his knights will move.
What? He's one of ours.
Well, yeah. Anywho, it's not time for us to move just yet. Kechachaka wanted to yell that was absurd, but bit his tongue. It was his impression that Franz Argman was clean, completely entirely clean. He had of his own volition proven his innocence with tears of truth. There was no way such a man was a fox. On the other hand, the same relic had shown the 1,000 Tricks to be innocent as well. If this job goes well, I'm going to take a break from all this, Kechachaka told himself.
So be it.
He began to stroke his chin. Unlike Kechachaka, he was maintaining composure. Just how did the 1,000 Tricks appear from his perspective?
That reminds me, there's something I'd like to confirm with you. What do you plan to do about Chris?
What do you mean by that?
You two seem quite close. Do you mind if she's eliminated?
What? What? The 1,000 Tricks looked and sounded absolutely taken aback. But they had to do everything they could to reduce the risk of failure, and that noble spirit was an obstruction. We're not particularly close, but we're not going to eliminate her. Do you two have something against her? A pro knew to keep their personal feelings from interfering with their work. If he said they weren't particularly close, then did that mean his friendly banter with her had been an act? And if so, then to what end?
I wouldn't say that. But am I correct in assuming that we should leave her to you?
The man of the 13th tail briefly tilted his head side to side before nodding to himself. Yeah, I guess I should do something leader-like every now and again. I'll give Chris a verbal warning.
Verbal?
Neither Telm nor Kechachaka knew how to respond.
Very well.
They found this immensely concerning. Was this man serious? Did he really think a verbal warning would silence her? It couldn't possibly work. But being foxes meant that they had to obey their superiors. They heard noises outside. It sounded like they were checking for damage from the storm. There was no way this fortress of an airship could be affected by a bit of inclement weather. But if the airship were to go down now, the crash would be attributed to the storm. This was an ideal opportunity for sabotage, and how could they possibly hope for anything better? As though reading Kechachaka's mind, the 1,000 Tricks suddenly turned his way. Kechachaka's heart pounded, and he felt a shiver down his spine. With a stern expression, the 1,000 Tricks got up and walked towards Kechachaka. Then he walked right past him. He gazed out the window, so Kechachaka did the same. Outside, flying in the middle of the brutal storm, was a massive kite. Kechachaka rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, the kite was still there. Clinging to the kite were those ridiculous bedsheet elementals. Not half bad. Then, as if it had been waiting for the perfect moment, a bolt of lightning struck the kite. There was a loud boom and down it went. With a look of mild surprise, the 1,000 Tricks watched it go. Kechachaka let out a low groan as he made his way to his room, where he threw himself onto his bed. Hey, Chris, did you do something rude to Telming? Chris folded her arms and gave me an unhappy look.
If anyone's been rude to him, it'd be you, sir.
Not the nicest way to put it, but I couldn't argue with her. The weather was still stormy. I was used to storms and lightning, but only on a few occasions had I dealt with them while in the air. There were flashing lights, loud noises, and the airship was rocking from side to side. Without perfect vacation, I would have been very uncomfortable. The carpet, however, was jovial as ever and was dancing around with the carpet I had purchased back in town. That carpet had set me back a bit. While it was a normal carpet that couldn't move or anything, the relic carpet didn't seem to mind at all. I was actually worried those two might elope. What mysterious things relics can be. And those two sure have a serious height gap.
Why are you always having me come to your room? I get why you might want to rely on me, but calling me over every single day is too much, sir. Could it be that you like me, sir? Well, give up on that. I'm here on Lapis's orders, not because I like you. Sir.
I hadn't even confessed, yet she rejected me. I'm sorry for calling you over every evening, but don't get the wrong idea just because I'm always relying on you. It's not that I disliked Chris. I was fond of everyone who charged my relics for me, and Chris's attitude wasn't as bad as some that I had dealt with. With her, Telm, and Kechachaka, I had really won the teammate lottery this time. You might even say I was on a winning streak. Oh, right, I think Telm still has the wrong impression about us.
Ugh, this is the problem with you humans and your year-round mating, see?
Don't say that in front of the Emperor.
You don't need to tell me. Do you think I'm an idiot? Unlike some people, I can watch my mouth. Sir.
Once this was over, I would have to show my gratitude to her. I considered sending her a big bag of amuse nuts. She seemed to like those, and they didn't hurt her so long as she didn't use her mana. We seemed to have gotten through the worst of the storm because the ship stopped shaking. By the sound of it, we had gotten by without any serious damage. My precious bedsheet elementals had been hit by lightning, but it took more than that, or a plummet to the ground to kill them, so I didn't worry. Then I heard rapid footsteps, and then the door flung open. It was Franz, drenched in sweat. I could see that he was tired, likely from directing everyone around, but there was a shine in his eyes. He didn't seem to notice Chris's shock as he pointed a finger at me.
See that 1,000 tricks? We did it. We made it through the worst of the storm. Bad weather is nothing to this ship. Your predictions were wrong. This ship is unstoppable.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Wasn't he a bit too ecstatic? After all, I had said we had a 90% chance of not crashing. He looked like he might start dancing. If he wanted a partner, I would have been willing to lend him my carpet.
You really like to pick fights wherever you can, sir.
Strange. I had no recollection of picking this fight Chris was talking about, but after seeing Franz so certain, some part of me felt to argue back. We're not out of the storm just yet. We need to be cautious.
Say what you want, sore loser. I'm done playing your games, so just stay out of the way. Now, I must report to His Imperial Majesty.
With that confident declaration, Franz puffed up his chest and strode out. His demeanor reminded me an awful lot of a noble. Then I remembered that he was a noble. Even Chris seemed like she had been blown over by a storm.
He has a lot of pent-up stress. When that happens, you should drink some herbal tea. You humans should take after us noble spirits and not get so worked up. Sir?
Herbal tea, huh? Citri loves to make those sorts of teas. Chris looked dismayed for some reason.
I don't think that's what you need. Sir, you're already more stress-free than most noble spirits.
The airship continued smoothly on, which wasn't something that happened very often when I was around. The ship didn't shake much, and while my relic kept me perfectly comfortable, I could tell this was a first-rate vessel if Chris wasn't complaining. Being made to transport the Empire's elites, our cabins were just as nice as the inn-rooms we had stayed at. The furnishings and furniture were superb, and the beds were nice and fluffy. Liz was adventurous, so I was sure she would have wanted to explore the entire ship if she were aboard. What a shame she'd gotten hit by that lightning bolt. I kept looking out my window, but all I saw were dense black clouds. No sign of a kite or any sheet race. My childhood friends were totally reckless enough to make another attempt at flying through the storm, but maybe they had accepted that it was impossible. But if they had such a solid grip on reality, then they wouldn't have tried to challenge the storm atop a kite in the first place. Sir Killigan was standing contentedly, I suppose, in the corner, more docile than the carpet. Lying on my bed, I watched the carpet and the carpet twirl around. I wonder if we'll crash. Given my terrible luck, it seemed possible. But if Franz was to be believed, this airship was tough. He said we would be fine even if dragons came for us, and I guess he could say that with confidence because he had previous experience with dragons. Of course, I was hoping for no crashing at all. When we landed, it would be in the capital of the desert country of Tauizant. It was a small country, but a stable one, so we would be safe there. So the next few days will be decisive. But if we hadn't seen any signs of Fox recently, it was possible they had given up on pursuing us. My muttering was interrupted by a knock on the door. I heard Telm's voice on the other side, so I hopped out of bed and tried to look like I was working. Telm stuck his head in, looking perfectly awake despite the late hour.
Forgive me for suddenly intruding in the middle of the night. However, I felt there were some things we should confirm. Ketcha is of the same mind.
I wavered, then put on a hard-boiled front. I couldn't help it when Telm was so hard-boiled. I figured you'd come sooner or later. He wanted to confirm things. What a diligent hunter. This sense of responsibility. This was level 7. This was what a battle-hardened veteran was like. I wished Luke and my other uncontrollable friends would learn a thing or two from him. I could barely believe someone this collected was a friend of that old lady. I'll have to pay the Abyssal Inferno back. Telm's eyes widened when he heard me.
Very confident of you, but Rose is second to none when it comes to destruction, and you won't be able to catch her off guard. She's destruction incarnate, and I'm not sure you truly realize that.
Huh. She'll incinerate me if I say thanks? What for? God, what a fiend. If anything was going to get me scorched, not saying anything seemed the more likely cause, yet it didn't seem like Telm was joking. So, I made a mental note to make sure my safety rings were all charged up before I went to her. So you wanted to confirm some things, right? I don't think that's necessary. I'll just follow you as I always have.
What?
Perhaps I was shoving too much off on him, but I had no fighting or command skills. If we needed someone to take charge, then that should be left to someone with a wealth of experience, like Telm. If I were to start issuing orders, then I'd likely be blamed if anything went wrong. I mean, I'd probably be blamed even if I didn't issue any orders, but I'd still feel better with somebody else in charge. Sorry, but this is my way of doing things. Oh, and about Chris. I've talked with her, so you don't need to worry about her.
So, you're leaving the execution to us.
Is there a problem with that? If something happens, I'll support you. I hadn't shown much in the way of leadership, but I saw nothing wrong with leaving this in their hands.
No objections. If this is your way of doing things, we'll adjust accordingly. With the stage set so perfectly for us, this will be an easy task.
He looked awfully solemn for a man saying he expected an easy job, but I guess a proper sense of responsibility does that to you. And he mentioned the stage being set, but I hadn't done anything of the sort. Even his lip service was top-notch. What a fearsome fellow. I only hoped I could age as gracefully as Telm had. Then I remembered something. Telm had a tail. Those were hunks of mana, so they immensely expanded Amagus's abilities. Without thinking, I grinned and said, "Right. Now, show me the power of the seventh tail." After that, the airship proceeded uneventfully. Once we had passed through the worst of it, our voyage had been surprisingly uneventful. At our briefing, I noticed Franz's complexion had improved. And, just as I was wondering if we might complete our journey without any more trouble, it came. I was in my room hanging around with Chris, when Franz dashed in. He didn't look afraid or panicked, just confused.
1,000 tricks! His Imperial Majesty requests your presence.
Has something happened? I was surprised. I hadn't heard any commotion.
Look outside. I'm sure you've noticed, but even after all this time, we still haven't left the storm.
I turned towards the window. Outside, the sky was dark as ever. Telm Apocles looked out the window and sighed. A full day passed, yet they still hadn't escaped the storm.
To think the gap between our skills is this wide.
This storm was undoubtedly abnormal. The wind was slow and the rain was thin, but the darkness wouldn't dissipate. Maintaining a spell over a long period was difficult. Telm specialized in water magic. He'd earned his title Counter Cascade when he brought a massive waterfall to a halt. But even the expertise he had spent his whole life developing didn't help him identify the nature of this storm. This was the third time Telm had been forced to recognize someone's superior abilities. And this time, those abilities belonged to a man much younger than him. Reminiscing, Telm rubbed the bracelets on his wrists. They were called Hydrogod's Grace, and he had obtained them through a stroke of good luck in the level 6 treasure vault, Hydrogod's Hermitage. The bracelets applied a strong water-based blessing to their wearer, which greatly enhanced Telm's powers. Selling them at the right place could ensure that the next 3 generations of his family wouldn't have to work. Telm was far more powerful than he had been when he stopped that waterfall 20 years ago, yet he couldn't discern how this storm was being created. And it wasn't just the storm, that spell that turned people into frogs had also been incomprehensible to him. This was no doubt beyond his realm of expertise, but what he found so scary was that that man could cast suddenly, without warning. Telm had been confident in his ability to cast swiftly, but that young man's abilities likely far outclassed his own.
Rose, then the Master of Magi, and now him.
The Imperial capital's strongest water magus had two previous rivals. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say two had been considered his rivals. To a mediocre magus, Telm might have seemed comparable to them, but Telm's middling abilities allowed him to understand just how vastly those two surpassed him. One became a hunter like Telm, specialized in fire spells, and became the Abyssal Inferno. The other remained in academia, where he continued his research and was eventually kicked out for daring to gaze into the abyss. Telm wasn't saddened by that. For those who pursue power, the confines of the law were far too constricting. But there was an undeniable irony to the fact that a woman like Rosemary Puripose, who was feared for her fury, was still a free member of society. Telm had become as powerful as he was by using every means possible, including joining Nine-Tailed Shadow Fox. If the 1,000 Tricks had accumulated so much power, he must have also crossed the confines of the law. Yet Telm didn't find himself envious. Perhaps this was a sign he was getting old. The thought brought a bitter smile to his lips, and he pulled himself together. Failure was only a remote possibility, but that was no reason to get complacent. The Imperial Guard were well trained, but Telm's rapid spellcasting meant they were no obstacle. He could sneak up and kill his target before anyone realized what was happening. He had obtained Hydrogod's grace decades ago. He could use the relics as though they were an extension of his body. Telm created a pool of water before him, which began to change color and shape. After a few seconds, it took the form of a humanoid wearing a fox mask. This was a supreme display of water magic, made possible by mastery of his relics. It was an original spell, and the only way in which he surpassed the Abyssal Inferno. At first glance, the humanoid was indistinguishable from a real person. But it wasn't a living being, so it had no presence. Nobody had yet seen through this spell, except the 1,000 Tricks. He had called it a fake, but he was an outlier. If one of Fox's top members had directly asked for Telm's help on this job, that implied they had high expectations of him. At the same time, that showed just how important this duty was. Failure was not an option. The man of the 13th tail had chosen to let Telm choose when to strike. The time was right, and there wasn't going to be anything better.
Ketcha, let's go. Have you prepared?
Kichachika reached into his pocket and showed Telm the gem wrapped in black fabric. As always, Telm couldn't tell what was going through Kichachika's mind, but there was a certain glint in his eyes. He seemed a bit tired after being teased by the 1,000 Tricks, but that wouldn't prove an issue for them. Dragon's reprisal was even rarer than Telm's bracelets. The gem's power was unlike any other, and was very useful for their current situation. It would take more than dragons to bring the Black Star down, but if the ship were to go down under such circumstances, everyone would jump to the same conclusion. It was then that Telm noticed another object Ketchakaka was holding.
What's that?
Oh. It was a box with a lever and multiple buttons. It appeared to be some sort of controller. Kichaka gingerly put the item in his pocket and let out another shrill, inscrutable laugh. Telm couldn't stop the sigh that escaped his mouth. Magi tended to be strange people. Shamans who converted emotions into magical power were especially odd, but Telm wasn't going to complain about someone competent, loyal, and who got results. Telm gave up on understanding the odd fellow and pointed with his chin.
First, engineering. Let's be quick. This is supposed to be our job, so we can't make any extra work for the 1,000 Tricks.
Rain was falling. With an ample supply of usable water, the counter cascade was unmatched. He would show the world, the Abyssal Inferno, and the man of the 13th tail what he was capable of. I entered a large room where the Emperor, the Imperial Princess, and the Imperial Guard were already waiting. There was a large window meant to let sunlight flood the room, but all I could see through it were black clouds. The storm was scary even from the small window in my cabin, but seeing it like this made it seem like the world was coming to an end.
We're keeping in touch with the surface via Comstone, and it appears they're receiving no rainfall down there.
I see. For some reason, everyone's eyes were on me. That included the Emperor and the fretful gaze of the Imperial Princess. However, there wasn't a single worthwhile thought going through my mind, so we weren't able to escape the storm. There was nothing I could do about it. If there were any solutions obvious enough to occur to me, they would have long ago occurred to Franz or someone else. All that was left for me to do was try to ease everyone's fears. This is some terrible luck.
Bad luck? Is that all you have to say for yourself?
See, calm down. It's just a storm. They happen all the time.
Where is this normal?
Franz was red in the face, and spittle flew when he shouted. What was I supposed to say? I didn't know what I didn't know, and things that happened all the time. Hell, even my carpet was baffled. If they were going to call someone over, they should have at least called Telm the water magus. Maybe he could have used his magic to make the storm disappear or something. Why did people like Franz and Gark always call on me when something happened? Their judgment of character was awful. Making me the leader proved their eye for people was on par with the rest of Grieving Souls. I couldn't make it as a hunter if I started squealing every time an odd storm came along. This ship won't fall. Franz clenched his teeth and sunk into a brief silence. I stood there quietly waiting when he began to speak in a strained voice.
I apologize, Krai and Dre, for not heeding your warnings, but right now, our top priority is the safety of His Imperial Majesty. What is going to happen? What should we do?
The Imperial Guard were all caught off guard by Franz's statement. Naturally, so was I. While Franz's expression didn't look at all apologetic, his willingness to say he was sorry was still significant. But unfortunately, I didn't know the cause of this storm, nor what we were supposed to do about it. Even if he bowed, even if he gravelled, I still couldn't offer information I didn't have. Also, I'm not sure he had done anything to necessitate an apology. At a total loss as to what to do, I scratched my cheek and said, "Really sorry, but I don't know."
You wretch! Even after I apologize!
Franz lifted me by the collar and shook me back and forth. "Calm down. If you want to know why the storm is here, then you should ask it." I was helpless to stop Franz's shaking, but then a slender arm came between us. My world stabilized, and I saw the arm belonged to Chris, who had been silently watching up until that point.
That's enough, sir.
She seemed to be in a fouler mood than usual.
What?
Now, isn't the time for this, sir. You're stressed, but we need our leaders to be calm more than ever, sir.
With a grunt, Franz shoved me away. I stumbled but somehow managed to stay on my feet. Chris then casually moved in between us.
For starters, I feel bad watching the sap get blamed for a storm that isn't his fault.
Why, yeah, she's right. She's completely right. I was out of the fire at least. The knights all seemed relieved to see their captain's rage subsiding. Franz was way too high-strung. I could understand that he was bearing a heavy responsibility by being in charge of the Emperor's safety. But nothing good could come from getting agitated by a slightly drawn-out storm.
But that man obviously knows something. He understands what's going on and he's mocking us. You heard him, didn't you? He told us not to let our guard down until we got out of the storm and that he hoped it really was just a storm. How could he think that a cutting-edge airship could crash? How do you explain that?
Chris turned on me instantly, looking at me with a suspicious glare.
Human weakling, are you really as ignorant as you claim? Sus.
I didn't know what I didn't know. While trying to think of an excuse to buy time, I looked around and my mind went blank. Behind the Emperor, near the window, was a figure in a robe and a fox mask. Before I could say anything, Franz, Chris, and the Emperor all noticed what I was looking at and began to move.
Where did he come from?
He covered his daughter and moved away. The knights drew their weapons, Chris raised her staff, and Sir Killigan moved in on the foe. It was incredible synchronization. The only one not moving was me. Sir Killigan!
Kill.
However, even an amateur could tell that Sir Killigan's attacks lacked finesse. He's already getting hit? That's one of Citri's creations! Sir Killigan withstood the incoming blows and swung its sword down with a wretched shriek. Fox Mask dodged it with ease. Despite being surrounded by knights, and at a severe disadvantage, he didn't look concerned in the slightest. Then the door flung open. What great timing! In came the world's greatest allies, Telm and Kechikaka. Good timing. I was waiting for you too.
Telm, it's a fox. Where did it come from? Just don't let it get away.
The Emperor was behind me. Franz, Chris, the Imperial Guard, and the Emperor were all looking at Fox Mask, which meant the only person who saw Telm's expression was me. His eyes widened just slightly, but then he smiled.
Forgive us for the delay. This ship is quite large.
What? I had no idea how it had happened, but the knights and servants surrounding Fox Mask had all collapsed. Only Franz was still conscious, but he was kneeling and his head was swaying. Fox Mask didn't flinch. Kris hadn't been affected for some reason and was frantically looking left and right. The only people unharmed were her, the Emperor, the Imperial Princess, Sir Killigan, Telm Kichachaka, and Fox Mask. What's going on? Why did they collapse? I hadn't heard or seen anything that sounded like it could cause this. And I was unharmed, and I hadn't sensed any of my safety rings activating. I just stood there, still wearing the smile I had made when Telm entered.
Goodness, I hadn't expected the conclusion to be so easy. You're a series of surprises. 1,000 tricks.
Ha! Why do I have to cooperate with the human weakling? Madam, he didn't even bring me a souvenir from his vacation.
Noble spirits were long-lived beings. Not only did they live much longer than humans, they also aged at a slower rate. Their lives were peaceful, almost like those of plants. Humans, however, were born, reproduced, and reached their ends 3 times as fast, which was downright dizzying to noble spirits. In part, most noble spirits didn't leave their forests because they looked down on the incompetent humans, but it was also because they found the whirlwind lives of humans to be nauseating. With that in mind, noble spirits like Kris, who lived among humans of their own accord, could be considered quite lively and curious.
Kris, this is a wonderful opportunity. There aren't many opportunities to work with the 1,000 tricks, as he rarely gets personally involved in matters. This is a chance to gain insight into how Lucia Rogier, the avatar of creation, got so powerful. This is an important task. You might say it concerns our future.
But, Lapis, I'm not accustomed to protecting people. I might get in the way.
Kris understood Lapis's reasoning. She was much more curious and ambitious than the average noble spirit. Not to mention she was willing to cooperate with humans, though maybe not as much as the enigmatic Eliza Beck, the vagabond. But Kris was still a noble spirit at heart, which left her uncertain. She was aware of it, but she had a tendency to make people angry no matter what she did. Speaking in polite terms required deliberate effort on her part. She could get by if she was dealing with a mere merchant, but there was no telling what might happen if she were to interact with a noble or even the emperor. The consequences of her actions could extend beyond just her party and affect her entire clan. Kris couldn't begin to guess what drove that idiot human weakling to approach Lapis for this job.
I don't know what drove that man to ask for our help, but going along with the 1,000 tricks is never a mistake. And we need to learn the source of his power and his methods. Kris, this is something only you can do.
Kris couldn't refuse the job after hearing that. This was an important task. Learning the secret of the 1,000 tricks would make her party stronger and satisfy her personal curiosity. Kris gathered her courage and clenched her fists, but then something occurred to her.
But Lapis, why me? There are definitely better options in our party.
Oh, that? It appears you get along with the 1,000 tricks better than any of us.
Lapis was entirely off the mark. By no means did Kris get along with the 1,000 tricks. He would ask for her help, and her pride as a noble spirit and her powers obliged her to comply. And Kris only entertained his requests because he was Lucia's older brother. And while the human weakling was a moron who didn't take anything seriously, for a human, he wasn't a bad guy. Or so she had believed. Thus, the scenery before her left her shocked out of her wits, something that didn't often happen to noble spirits. Bodies covered the floor. Every knight surrounding the Fox Mask was on the ground, not even twitching. The one member of the Imperial Guard who was still conscious was Franz, and he was kneeling. Outside, the world was dark and gloomy.
What the hell?
So the Emperor wasn't affected because of his safety ring. But did this one shoulder the damage meant for the Imperial Princess? Did his armor do that? Wasn't he one of ours? Whatever the case, I'd advise you not to move. You'll die soon enough, but moving will just drain your already meager life force.
Fox Mask then dissipated with only the faintest sound. Telm looked unconcerned, and next to him, the 1,000 tricks had a smile plastered to his face. Kris couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. No, it was that she didn't want to comprehend. The Imperial Guard had been knocked out by a spell, an extremely quiet and powerful spell meant to wring the life out of someone. It was a contemptible form of magic, the sort that noble spirits didn't employ. The Imperial Guards were still alive. They had been knocked out, but Kris could sense a faint pulse. That pulse, however, was gradually weakening. If they weren't treated quickly, they would soon die. It was only a hunch, but Kris had a strong suspicion as to what this spell prioritized: efficiency. It was in the name of efficiency, not mercy, that this spell didn't kill instantaneously. Since the targets would die anyway, it would be a waste for the spell to also cut off their breathing. When Chris had watched Telm defeat the brood of frigid dragons, something about his magic had caused her to shudder. She had thought it was just her imagination, but her intuition had proven correct. Humans were terrifying. Their short lives meant they developed rapidly. They lived like there might not be a tomorrow, a mindset that invited acts of homicide. And now she understood Fox Mask. If he was a simple clone, that would explain his lack of presence and ability to appear without warning. It was a sort of magic she had never seen before, but she could understand its purpose, which was to catch people unaware. Just like with physical attacks, magical attacks also became more effective when they caught their target off guard. Chris felt a chill down her spine. This man wielded overwhelming strength and was prepared for anything. She felt the metal staff in her right hand, a different sensation from her usual wooden one. She opened her mouth, but what came out wasn't an incantation but a scream.
Wow, what's the meaning of this? Sir? Do you understand what you've done, Chachachaka? Why didn't you stop Tell?
Weren't you going to explain everything to her, Thousand Tricks? Well, it doesn't matter. Your methods aren't mine to question, and she's no threat to us. If you don't want to see her hurt, pull her back.
Now Chris understood the situation. As much as she didn't want to, she had figured it out.
I knew we had a traitor in our midst, but it was you, Telmapocles. You're a fox.
He was calm, but a hand rested on the sword at his hip.
Indeed. But now we must say farewell. Soon, this ship will crash.
Chris couldn't win here. Even if she managed a sneak attack, she wouldn't be able to bring down Telm. The counter Cascade's abilities were practically inhuman. He was a Grand Magus and he likely surpassed Lucia Rajier when it came to water magic. Even with his back turned to her, Chris couldn't see any openings. Any hope of victory for her rested in the staff she had been entrusted with. Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsukakage, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. The Thousand Tricks' expression had remained static since Telm's entrance. For the first time, Chris found his hapless smile chilling. Telm's earlier words suggested that the human weakling was also a fox. Quickly, Chris moved back and raised her staff. Propping himself up on his sword, Franz managed to get on his feet, but his eyes were cloudy and he had a sickly pallor. In that condition, even Chris was more fit for close-quarters combat.
Krai Andre, you were a fox? Despite his condition, he weakly drew his weapon. The well-polished blade glimmered as it shook in his hands. I'll stop you. I was certain you couldn't be trusted. Damn it.
You underestimated us, and it is that on which you can blame your defeat. Fox is omnipresent. Up here, you won't receive reinforcements. Would you care to show the four of us what the honored captain of Zebrudia's Zero Order is capable of?
They had been outmaneuvered. The Emperor was also skilled with a blade, but certainly not enough to make him a match for Telm. That went for everyone there. Even if Franz was all right, the Imperial Guards on their feet, and Chris aided them. They didn't stand a chance when they were up against the counter Cascade and the Thousand Tricks.
I never should have believed you. You human weakling. Only Sir Killigan remained still. He too was likely a fox. When she took a moment to think about it, there was no way someone with a name like Sir Killigan was an upstanding individual. The fate of this mission had been sealed from the beginning when the Thousand Tricks had picked his teammates. Chris suppressed her anger and calmly evaluated the situation. She had no hope of victory. Survival depended on the Thousand Tricks. Had he been planning on turning her to his side? So he had miscalculated. Chris would never betray the client she was supposed to protect. A noble spirit would sooner choose to die with their head held high than to live on their knees. Chris had chosen to cooperate with the human weakling because she had been certain he was a good person. Only option available to her was to run. She would have to blast a hole in the airship and escape through that. She could use magic to survive the fall, but that would be for nothing if they chose to pursue her. And she couldn't take everyone with her. First priority would have to be the Emperor. Her second, the Imperial Princess.
Her mind settled, Chris prepared to cast a major spell. She steadied her breathing and began to concentrate. Hostility and Telm's immense concentration of mana hung over the room. Then the Thousand Tricks broke his silence. With a grave look on his face, he muttered, "I'm a fox? What are they talking about?"
Huh?
I couldn't make heads or tails of what was going on. I understood that I didn't have exactly the fastest brain in the world, but the events playing out before me were just too much for my mental capacity. It didn't even feel real. I couldn't even change my expression. The moment Telm had entered the room, the Imperial Guard had collapsed, Fox Mask disappeared, and accusations came my way. But even after figuring that much out, my brain was still mired in the confusion. I wasn't useful in most situations, but I was especially useless when there were unanticipated developments. I didn't know what was what. I was surprised to find that Telm and Kichikeka were our enemies, but I was even more surprised to see that everyone thought I was on their side. What a shock that was. I felt a number of gazes poking at me. Not too long ago, Franz had been about to end me, now he was leveling a sharp gaze my way. I felt a glare from Chris. Telm wore a mellow smile, and Kichikeka was his usual self. Even the Emperor and the Imperial Princess were fixated on me. Time came to a halt, but I was probably the most confused person present.
What? A trite joke. Thousand Tricks. There's no longer any need to act.
Huh? I was about to explain that I wasn't acting, but then my brain finally began to work. Normally, I would be breaking out in a cold sweat, but I wasn't sweating at all because I was perfectly comfortable. Hell, the only reason I wasn't panicking was because of perfect vacation. It was a powerful relic, but its ability to halfway force its wearer into being perfectly comfortable had its drawbacks. I couldn't stop and worry. Having Telm and Kichikeka for enemies was, well, terrible. They were my main firepower. Now all I had at my side was Chris, Sir Killigan, and Franz, and he was down on one knee for some reason. I took a deep breath and decided to set things straight. I took a step back and yelled, "I said back," and yelled, "Telm, Ketcha, you two are traitors? I believed in you."
What are you saying? You're a fox. Art. You.
What's he talking about? I wondered. When the pieces finally clicked, they sure took their time doing so. Maybe the fox Franz had been talking about wasn't the Phantom? I thought something had been off. The elusive Peregrine Lodge wasn't well known, and it was impossible to believe that its denizens would take an interest and get involved in human affairs. Besides, if they were our enemies, no amount of guards could have kept the Emperor safe. So if it wasn't the Phantom, then what were they talking about? Judging from their behavior, my best guess was that they were wary of some bandit squad or terrorist group. Unfortunately for Telm and Kichikeka, I was a coward, but I would never stoop to working with criminals. Fox? No, I'm human. A hunter. I don't understand where you're getting these ideas.
What? What? Then why do you know the code signs?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
This isn't funny. Didn't you say you were of the 13th tail?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Telm recoiled, but I was being honest. Code signs. 13th tail? The only thing that came to mind was the tail I had received from that aberrant fox, but that couldn't possibly have anything to do with this. Telm began to look increasingly uncertain. Even though I wasn't doing anything, he retreated a step.
I don't believe it. Damn it. Was all this trap? Is that why this storm is here?
Huh? Trap? Trap? What was this old guy on about? I didn't know anything about the storm, but his talk of traps was making it sound like I was in some way responsible for this, which didn't sit well with me. Telm raised his right hand, but I cut him off. Don't move, either of you. If you move, I'll turn you into bullfrogs. You've seen what I'm capable of, haven't you? I've just been holding back on this trip. I've just been holding back on this trip. Telm froze in place. A cold sweat formed on his cheeks. Even after making multiple attempts, my blossoming magical talents hadn't yet resurfaced. But if they weren't going to manifest at this moment, then when would they? I held out my arm, making myself more convincing.
Would you make it clear just whose side you're on? Sir...
I think my innocence has already been proven by tears of truth. I didn't get how there were any misunderstandings about my allegiance when a national treasure had declared me innocent. Franz, who had doubted me constantly, looked shocked. His lack of faith was pretty unreasonable if you ask me. He had seen me screw up over and over, but I didn't recall doing anything illegal.
You don't know? Then why did you select me for this job? Was it to observe us?
I don't have a single clue what you are talking about.
But this airship's propulsion systems have already been destroyed. It's going to crash.
What? Well, good thing I got on the carpet's good side. So I was right. We would crash, after all. Luckily, it didn't yet feel like we were falling. My guess was that the balloon part of the airship was ensuring our descent wasn't too rapid. But I was just spitballing. I didn't know anything about how the ship worked. I smiled with resignation. I no longer cared. This escort job was clearly a lost cause. But the Emperor was still alive, and there was still a chance the knights could be saved. Anything put together can fall apart. Franz, right. He's indisposed. Sir Killigan, apprehend those too. However, Citri's friend didn't move an inch. I was trying to understand why it wouldn't move, but then I heard a dubious laugh.
Oh.
Ketcha can talk?
Bo?
And you sound so pleased.
She was right. Ketchakaka was glowing. So both my allies and enemies thought I was working for the other side? That sucks. Ketchakachaka pulled out a small controller. It was the one that my dear friend Citri had given me to control Sir Killigan. I thought I had lost it, but how did it end up with him? I don't believe it. It was absurd. I couldn't recall ever using the controller in front of Ketchakaka, but it seemed he had somehow inferred the connection between it and Sir Killigan. Citri's friend was supposed to be in auto mode, but it didn't budge.
Yeah. He knew from the start that this was a golem. Hey. Never underestimate Fox. 1,000 tricks. Now D.
Ketchakaka pushed the joystick and pressed a large button. Sir Killigan twitched briefly, then moved its arms and legs in a stilted manner, doing a strange sort of dance. The dance feature was a bit half-baked. Ketchakaka watched in silence, looking like he was in a nightmare. Once its routine was over, Sir Killigan stood still, then collapsed. Then I remembered that I hadn't once fed it anything. I felt like it had never been around during mealtimes. What was I supposed to feed it? Raw meat? Well, it looks like we won't have to fight Sir Killigan. I looked at Ketchakaka, who was dumbfounded, and gave a hard-boiled shrug. Ah, and here I was, planning to use that one later. Now what were you saying?
Hey.
Ketchakaka broke down. Telm held his hands out towards me, which made me think he was surrendering. Desperately pleading in my mind that they would get turned into bullfrogs, I stood protectively in front of Chris and the others. Then a spell was cast. Countless spears of water formed in an instant. The cast time was unbelievable. I hadn't seen any warning signs. The spears flew straight at me and I had nowhere to run. They carried immense force and traveled at an extraordinary speed, but it was their complete silence that made them unsettling. But I was perfectly comfortable thanks to Perfect Vacation. Each one of the spears was blocked without even forcing me back. I had my safety rings to thank for this.
He's unharmed. Is this his famous absolute barrier?
Incredible spell casting there, Telm. You're definitely one of the strongest magi I've ever met. To all appearances, I looked perfectly comfortable. But on the inside, I wasn't as calm as I might have seemed. What a fearsome magus he was. Not only was he quick and powerful, his control was phenomenal. I could tell because the spears had all been blocked by a single safety ring. The barriers deployed by safety rings lasted for only a brief instant. If those spears hadn't all landed at the same moment, one of them might have gotten through. I doubt even Lucia could have managed a similar level of precision. I grinned and prepared to let loose a spell. But playtime's over. Become orange juice. Telm and Ketchakaka both took wary steps backwards. My spell was cast. It probably most likely, possibly was cast. But Telm and Ketchakaka showed no signs of becoming a citrusy beverage. I gave a small. Maybe. I can't use magic after all? Looks like today's just one of those days. But if you run, I won't come after you.
Even now, you continue to mock us. Turn to ice.
Telm's bracelets both began to glow faintly. I heard a small crackling noise which got closer and closer until it enveloped me. None of my safety rings activated, a result of perfect vacation. This shirt relic offered next to nothing in the way of defense, but it made changes in temperature a non-issue. It kept me perfectly comfortable. Though she was behind me, Chris was unaffected, likely because Telm had narrowed the spell's area of effect in exchange for more power.
Impossible. How could this be? The cold air wasn't just blocked. It was erased.
Heat and humidity have no effect on me.
Is now the time for jokes, sir?
The blood rushed to Telm's face.
We'll bring this whole ship down.
With a high-pitched laugh, Kachachaka began stomping on the ground. I didn't know what he was doing, but I could tell my safety rings were being gradually depleted. Sure, it seemed inauspicious, but I wasn't sure this was actually a hex. Whatever it was, it seemed harder to fight than Telm's attacks. We couldn't let the ship crash, but my mysteriously vanished powers left me no means of fighting back. Chris, however, picked up on this and began an incantation.
Ag! I keep telling you I'm no good with fire spells. Firestorm.
I apologetically activated a shooting ring. The weak projectile charged at Telm as he continued with another incantation, but disappeared before it could hit him. Placing a rudimentary barrier was common practice among magi, so that must have been it. I heard these barriers couldn't protect against spells of any real power, which said a whole lot about the utility of shooting rings. After my projectile disappeared, Chris's firestorm connected with Telm. A shower of sparks poured down on him, but to no effect. It didn't make any sense that a spell from Chris would be so weak. Was she holding back? I couldn't help but look at her and see that she was more baffled than I was. She looked at Round World, the staff I had lent her, and screamed.
Oh, what's the matter with this staff? Sir!
You shouldn't blame the staff. It's hopeless. Nothing's working out like it was supposed to. Meanwhile, a mystic light emanated from both of Telm's bracelets. I didn't own many staff relics, so my knowledge was limited, but I was sure that blue light was a sign of something extraordinary. We screwed.
Accept your demise, glacial beyond.
Faster, Lucy! Higher!
Shut up! This isn't an ordinary storm.
Red in the face, Lucia desperately tried to maintain control of the kite spell. The party had already ditched their bed sheets. They had more important things to be concerned about. The kite was massive and carrying 5 people, and one of them, and their luggage made it monstrously heavy. Yet Lucia's attempts to keep it under control had little effect. She felt like she was gripping the reins of a bucking horse. For someone who had trained herself to be able to cast spells even under dire circumstances, this was unbelievable. The sensation was like trying to use a spell while inside an anti-magic barrier. Obviously, this wasn't a typical storm. Even still, she managed to ride the intense winds and the kite ascended. Apocalyptic clouds blacked out the sky, and they could sense something large inside. Clinging to the top end of the kite, Citri cocked her head.
There couldn't be a barrier at this altitude, and the movements of the clouds are less than natural.
Oh, look how high we are. Lucia, hit the storm dead on. I'm getting the first swing. Just watch. Last time they caught me off guard, but this time I'll cut a lightning bolt. What sort of man would I be otherwise?
Enzum grunted in agreement, and so the white kite and its oddball passengers barreled straight into the inky clouds. One thing about magic that terrified me was that it was nothing more than an extension of the ordinary world that I lived in. I could understand how swinging a sword allowed you to cut through something, but I couldn't even begin to understand how a magus could create a fire just by snapping their fingers. Apparently, magic operated on its own set of rules, but only magi could wrap their minds around said rules. A strong understanding of them was how Lucia obtained the august title, Avatar of Creation. Even as magic words echoed from Telm's mouth, I had no idea what he was about to do. I reassured myself, telling myself that the safety rings would protect me. I shut my eyes and held out my right hand. Running was pointless. The only thing I could do now was act as a wall. The ship suddenly stopped shaking. I expected to sense another safety ring going off, but that didn't happen. When I opened my eyes, I saw Telm looking bewildered.
Ridiculous. Impossible. I have plenty of mana, so why can't I cast?
Huh? He failed? He invoked those magic words so confidently, but then he failed. Telm was clearly vulnerable, but our knights were all incapacitated, and I couldn't even beat a magus in a brawl. so we couldn't capitalize on the opening. I guess my hope that the Emperor would go on the offensive was wishful thinking. Kichachaka hadn't even done anything, but he took a step back.
Uhe. Hey.
Is this the doing of the storm? Is it interfering with our magic?
I couldn't use magic, so I was perfectly comfortable. As per usual, I didn't understand what was happening, but it looked like we had been saved. But I had been under the impression this storm was Telm's doing. Either way, I did the only thing I could do, which was put on the hard-boiled smile I had spent so much time practicing in front of the mirror. Looks like the tables have turned. Without your magic, you're just an old man.
Damn it!
Telm began to sprint. Lines of light glowed on his body like veins. It seemed there were still some spells he could use, as those were the product of strengthening spells. Those were a magus's last resort if their other spells weren't working. They placed a heavy burden on the body of the caster, and they still didn't necessarily make a magus as powerful as a dedicated melee fighter, so strengthening spells were considered a desperate measure.
Huh? I can't use magic either. Sir?
Neither can I. Telm moved like someone of far fewer years. His low posture was like that of a thief. His wealth of experiences and hardships far exceeded my own. I quickly began wildly firing off with my shooting rings. A bright but weak flurry of projectiles flew towards Telm, but he evaded them. Without stopping, he grabbed a discarded sword off the ground and hurled it at me. It flew straight as an arrow, but once again, a safety ring deployed a barrier. I only had 5 left. Telm gulped. Earlier, he hadn't even bothered to dodge the projectile from my shooting ring, but just now he had gone out of his way to avoid them. I had a feeling I knew what this meant. It looks like you can't even put up a barrier. Despite my dwindling number of safety rings, I was perfectly comfortable and feeling bold. My brilliant deduction spurred him to fall back.
You freak!
Was that a joke? He was far more freakish than I was.
Don't get complacent. Hurry up and finish him off, sir.
I didn't see why she couldn't use that staff I'd lent her to pummel Telm. Even without her magic, I was pretty sure Chris was still less useless than I was. I didn't know what to do. Restraining a magus required tools that could stifle magic, and even those didn't always work on well-trained magi. Because of this, most fights between powerful magi didn't end until someone was dead. Telm, I have no desire to kill the right hand of the Abyssal Inferno. Throw down those bracelets and surrender. It wasn't like I was interested in his relics or anything. However, those bracelets obviously contributed to his power. For magi, a staff both amplified and controlled mana. Just like Chris struggled to cast with a staff she wasn't accustomed to, Telm would lose a large portion of his power without his staff. Hearing my request, Telm's handsome features contorted, his antipathy clear as day. But just as he was about to say something, Kichaka cut him off.
Tell, the dragons aren't coming. They should retreat.
Damn.
Why do my allies get stronger when they become my enemies, and enemies get weaker when they become my allies? Not too long ago, all you could do was laugh suspiciously. Quietly, Telm turned around. Moving fast as any warrior, he kicked down the door and fled from the room. Kichachaka followed after him. All I could do was watch them go. Even if I caught up to them, I couldn't beat them in a fight. I could have released the hounding chain, but that wouldn't have been able to catch a level 7.
Let's go after them. Sir?
Calm down, Chris. We can forget about them for now. Our first priority should be saving lives. Franz and all these other people need healing. In a stroke of good luck, our supplies, due to their abundance, had been divided up and stored throughout the ship. While I wasn't used to healing people, Chris was able to quickly prepare potions and administer them to the collapsed knights. Even the first to fall were still alive. After receiving Citri's special potions, their complexions quickly improved and their breathing stabilized.
It looks like that wasn't a simple destruction spell, sir.
But I couldn't move. My strength had left me.
He just made minor alterations to the water in their bodies. That takes an unbelievable level of skill. Even with the advantage of surprise provided by the decoy, not even Lapis could have done something like this. Sir.
Chris sounded grave. Since it was a basic aspect of magic, even I knew that it was incredibly difficult to directly affect someone else's internals with a spell. To some degree or another, all human bodies were resilient to magic. That meant that Telm's powers were among the best out there if he could knock out so many people in the span of a second. An automatic barrier from a safety ring could keep you safe, but no spell could protect you from a sneak attack like that. Franz wobbled as he rose to his feet, but it seemed like the other knights still couldn't even do that. Their lives were no longer in danger, but they wouldn't be able to fight Telman Kachakaka. Even now, the Emperor was unfazed. He sat down in his chair and asked me,
What now? Do we have any chance of victory?
Not in the slightest, sir. Don't you agree, human weakling?
Her sharp gaze implored me to agree with her, but I was still perfectly comfortable. If I had to say one way or the other, I'd guess we didn't have a shot at victory. But since the ship was going down, escape should have been our priority anyway. Chris, do you know how to fly?
I can, but not with a shitty staff, sir.
That's because that's not a staff, that's a translation device.
Excuse me?
I gently looked away as Chris began bashing Round World on the ground. I hadn't expected things to turn out like this. What to do? I've got no clue. I barely even understand what's going on. What a bad spot to be in. At a total loss, I retrieved some smoked meat from the supplies and set it before Sir Killigan, who was on the ground, twitching due to what I assumed to be starvation. I figured I might as well do that. I told myself to be calm. That's what you do when panicking won't help. I folded my arms and closed my eyes. I was perfectly comfortable. I've got it. Maybe if we buy enough time, my beloved sheet wraiths will save us. In a shrill voice, Chris interrupted my daydreaming.
Behind you.
I spun around and looked down. Crouched down next to Sir Killigan was a small figure. It was a child. A human child. Liz was small, but not this small. They wore a loose-fitting white robe. Their small arms reached out, grabbed the smoked meat, brought it to their mouth, and slowly munched on it. I didn't recall there being any children about the airship. It was an eerie sight, but I wasn't unnerved. I was perfectly comfortable. But that isn't to say I wasn't surprised. The child didn't say a thing. Everyone else was pale as a ghost. The Emperor was stunned. Even the carpet seemed uneasy. The child's white hair was long, but I couldn't tell their gender. That was because a strange mask covered the top half of their face. My mind froze again, letting my mouth move on its own. A real one. It was a little late, but I finally noticed the odd air that permeated the ship. Two smooth white ears sprung from their head. The words mysterious and supernatural both came to mind. There were stark differences between their fox mask and the one worn by Telm's friend. The one before me was a real one. The child tilted their head up at me. There were no eye holes in the mask, but I could tell they were looking at me. Before me was something that no human could win against. I should have shivered. I should have feared them as naturally as we humans fear death. But I was perfectly comfortable. I considered not wearing perfect vacation the next time I had an escort job. An old memory resurfaced. The last time I encountered one of these had also been during a strange storm. It seemed inclement weather was a companion of theirs. I hadn't heard of any sightings since our first encounter. But if they had been in the sky all this time, then that would certainly explain why. Why did this happen? Is this Telm's doing? No, it couldn't be. This was nothing more than a stroke of bad luck. They weren't something that could be steered by the hands of man. It was supposed to be impossible to meet them twice in one lifetime, but I guess I was just that unlucky. I thought my days had been fairly accident-free lately, but it turned out I had just been storing up a reservoir of bad luck. Glancing outside, I momentarily thought the storm had let up, but then I realized that was because it was no longer our world beyond the glass panes. Outside the window, it was pure white. Treasure vaults were alternate worlds recreated from mana material. Low-level vaults were based on the real world, but high-level vaults were different. These were spaces that operated on laws far removed from those of our world. Technically, they were separate worlds. This explained why our magic had stopped working. But my understanding of the situation wasn't going to improve it. I couldn't help but smile. The strange child with the fox mask, the phantom, also smiled. At some point, the scenery beyond the door kicked down by Telm had changed. We had collided. We had been swallowed up.
Welcome. Don't be afraid.
The inside of their mouth was red as fire. Their voice was faint and their intonation stilted, but they spoke our language. It was a treasure vault of immense power, an unfathomable realm that traversed the world. A living nightmare. It was a land of the divine, one that was nigh impossible to find and home to a phantom that nobody had ever vanquished. It was designated a level 10, Its denizens studied, traveled, and partook in games. The name of this uncanny treasure vault was Peregrine Lodge.
We're happy to have you.
They were gods. Memories of almighty gods that reigned over our world. I had survived one encounter with them, but I didn't expect that to happen a second time. They couldn't be slain. The one sliver of hope for meager humans lay in negotiation. That's just the sort of beings gods were. You liar. This abrupt accusation elicited a smile from the fox.
I wasn't lying.
Chris felt like she was going to vomit, as though something was directly touching her innards. There was a pressure, almost like she had slipped into some other realm. It was only her pride as a noble spirit and a hunter on duty that kept her standing. For hunters with low levels of mana material entering treasure vaults rife with mana material could, on rare occasions, induce discomfort. This was one of the most basic facts of hunting. However, it wasn't actually a common occurrence, so long as there was no significant gap between a hunter's level and the vaults. Chris looked out the window and saw a different world than the one she had been in. She wanted to scream with fear and confusion, but just barely kept a hold on her sanity. She was in an interworld treasure vault and feeling mana material-induced nausea. Putting these two facts together, she could tell this vault was more than a level or two above her. Moreover, she was certain the child with the fox mask was one of this vault's phantoms. What a terrifying thing they were. They were unlike any phantom she had ever seen. Compared to the fox child, dragons looked like mere lizards. They had the form of a child, but were clearly anything but. They spoke something resembling human language, but it didn't feel right to call those words. Instincts Chris had developed to protect her forest were blaring like alarm bells. Opposing this phantom would be even more hopeless than opposing Tell. That, of course, went for both her and the Imperial Guard. However, Chris didn't give in to despair because her leader, the Thousand Tricks, hadn't lost his composure. Even a level 8 was still human, yet his demeanor hadn't been changed in the slightest by the appearance of the phantom. Chris didn't sense any strength from him. The human weakling was still just that. But if he had been able to stay calm and even casually call the phantom a liar, then he must have been just as much of a fiend as the thing before him. She had to help him, to make sure they survived, but she was still struggling to grasp the situation. Human weakling!
Not now, Chris. You sometimes say the wrong things, and we don't want to agitate these guys. She wanted to object that she would never do such a thing, sir, but the tension in the air caused her to hold her tongue.
I don't mind.
Really? We're allowed to say rude things?
Yes, you can pick me.
Chris couldn't figure it out. It made no sense. Eld's words were a fable, but they emanated an aura of bloodthirst. This was an exchange between predator and prey. Phantom's words were hollow, divorced from their original meaning. It was eerie, like when a wind chime's ringing happened to sound similar to a person. Chris was astounded to see the human weakling talking so easily with the phantom. All she could do was rely on him, as he seemed to better grasp the situation.
I'm hungry. I want ice cream.
Ice cream? Will you let us go if we give you some?
Of course. I'm gonna barf.
You're a funny one.
How will we retire?
Human weakling chuckled when he heard this, almost like he was relaxed. But a phantom would never say things like, I want ice cream and I'm gonna barf. It defied reason, and the human weakling should have been well aware of that. Unnerved, Chris took a step back when she noticed the staff in her hands. Round world. Despite its impressive appearance, it was a defective tool that couldn't amplify mana. But what had the human weakling said about it? Right, that it wasn't a staff, it was a translation device. Chris didn't know how to use it, but she tried channeling mana into it. The gem at the top began to spin. The phantom opened their mouth, and as they spoke, the meaning of their words filtered into Chris's mind. She recoiled at the sheer anger of the phantom.
I like you. As she had vaguely suspected, their exchange was only friendly on the surface. Their words had no relation to their intentions.
Yeah, I like the chocolate too.
Human weakling, If you...
If you don't understand it, then use this. Sir! But before Chris could say that, Krai cut her off again. Chris, didn't I tell you to be quiet? Leave this to me. We're just chatting right now. But if this goes well, we'll be able to negotiate our release. What's important is that we don't antagonize them. We have no hope of defeating them.
Was there a reason he was playing dumb? Grinning, the child extended a slender arm towards the human weakling. At the same time, the room was filled with a sense of palpable enmity. Many of the Imperial Guards had lost consciousness. Everyone, besides Krai, was holding their breath as though waiting for a storm to pass.
What's that? You're a fan of mine? Gee, I don't know what to say. What an honor this is.
Even if he couldn't understand what the fox child was saying, the air of hostility should have been apparent to him. Yet he didn't show the slightest hesitation as he gripped the fox child's hand, leaving Chris no chance to stop him.
What a friendly phantom. Seeing the grinning fox child gave me a bit of breathing room. There were two types of phantoms within Peregrine Lodge. The immense aberrant fox that was the vault's core, and its numerous servants. The aberrant fox never left the vault's center, so the child in front of me must have been a servant. Even the weakest phantoms in this vault didn't go down without considerable effort. During my previous visit, I had been told that only a few servants had been slain since the vault's formation. In terms of power, I'd say they were comparable to the bosses of many high-level vaults. Even if Telm was on our side, our chances of victory would have been slim. His magic was horrifying because humans were fragile things. However, there was no guarantee it would be as effective against phantoms. I felt our best option was to do whatever we could to appease the phantoms and then escape. Pride be damned. Luckily for us, these phantoms were powerful, but they weren't bloodthirsty in the same way most typically were. Last time, I had earned their forgiveness after bowing and offering up a gift, but this time, the phantom didn't request either of those things. They just spoke fragmented words without making any particular demands. They were so genial, I thought they might be willing to let us go for free. I had to wonder if this Peregrine Lodge was a different lodge than the one I had been to before. Maybe they hadn't been lying when they said they were happy to have us. But I didn't want to be greeted, I wanted to be let free.
I'm actually a fan of yours. Please, shake my hand.
What cultural shift made me known among phantoms? But the child held out their hand, so I took it. And that's when it happened. I heard Chris let out a shriek. I had no idea what the fox child had done. There was no sound or color or anything. All I could tell was that my oh-so-expensive safety ring had activated. I frantically looked around. Chris's eyes were wide as saucers. I still didn't get it. I blinked a few times, then, still holding the phantom's hand, I said, "Wow, what did you do?"
That was fun.
Ha! The phantom began to disappear. Starting at their feet, they turned to dust as though rotting away. My hand gripped nothing but the air. I heard a clatter and saw that the only thing remaining was the child's fox mask. The next moment, I was caught off guard by a loud retching. Franz was on his hands and knees, vomiting profusely. The Emperor wasn't at that point, but the blood had left his complexion.
So that's how the phantoms of this vault are defeated, sir. How strange.
Chris took a step back. I noticed she was looking at the mask on the ground.
Was that a condition? They can't lie. They died because their next attack didn't kill. How can you stand this dense mana material, sir?
That? Oh, I'm perfectly comfortable. The vault's mana material seemed like the cause of everyone's poor condition. I had never experienced it because I had almost no ability to absorb or retain mana material, but hunters with strong absorption powers sometimes became sick if they took on too much. It was akin to muscle fatigue. Come to think of it, everyone in my party had the same nausea the last time we entered this vault. I picked up the mask. Had the phantom forgotten it? Or was it a drop? How come they had died when all I did was grip their hand? Was that their weakness? That seemed hard to believe, considering they requested a handshake of their own accord. Well, if they left the mask behind, I'll take it as a memento. I'll return it if they say they want it back. However, the ship was enveloped in white. Beyond the door, Telman Kachukakak had fled through. The scenery was the same as my last encounter with Peregrine Lodge. There was no point in sticking around the airship. This was no ordinary treasure vault, and I really didn't want to go out there, but I didn't know any way to escape that didn't involve earning the boss's forgiveness. No other way about it. I better get going. I didn't bring anyone with me. Being strong by human standards didn't change anything when up against these phantoms. Because I knew a bit about this place, I was actually our best shot at survival. Previously, one of the phantoms here told me that this vault had a rule. Nothing can restrain a god but the god themselves. As I approached the airship's exit, or was it the entrance, Chris called out to me.
Human weakling, take this staff.
Huh? I don't need that.
What? Then why'd you go out of your way to bring it, sir?
I thought you might want to use it. I didn't need it when the phantoms could already speak. What I needed was love. Yes, love. Opposing the phantom wouldn't get me anywhere. But the moment I stepped out the door, I heard a voice near my feet.
I want fried tofu. Give me fried tofu, or I'll attack.
I was sure nothing had been there a moment ago. Looking down, I saw a child, similar to the previous one, sitting on the vermilion floorboards. She was wearing a fox mask, but she wasn't quite the same, and her speech wasn't fragmented. This one was a girl, her hair a light gold. She wore a short white kimono and was pointing a thin finger at me. Fried tofu? Sorry, all I've got are the preserves citri, prepared for me.
Chris Argent was certain this was the most dire situation she had ever found herself in. She was in a treasure vault that far exceeded her capabilities, and the density of mana material was enough to make her queasy. She didn't have a staff. She was used to. Carrying two would have been difficult, and she hadn't expected things to get this bad. The unique laws of the vault didn't let her manipulate mana. Certain doom seemed like an apt description. At this point, her only choice was to rely on the human weakling, who seemed to know something about the treasure vault. But she still had her pride. She wouldn't let him take care of everything. Well, maybe she would, but she wasn't going to be a hindrance. She clenched her trembling fists, uncertain as to what to do. There was nothing she could do if she was deprived of her magic. She didn't even have a weapon. She could think, but that was one thing that Preterhuman Artificer could do better than her. Then she recalled what Telm had done earlier. When his offensive spells had failed, he immediately switched over to a strengthening spell. Chris wasted no time giving it a try. Strengthening spells were a basic form of magic that involved converting mana into power. Magical energy coursed through her body, and she felt a warmth deep inside her. As the spell took effect, she felt her trembling subside. So that was it. The laws of the treasure vault didn't extend inside bodies. No smart magus ever ventured into a treasure vault where they couldn't use magic, but after giving it some thought, Chris recalled hearing about this phenomenon before. Just as a treasure vault's laws were altered by mana material, a body could be altered by its own mana material. Now, Chris could fight. Using mana in a manner she was unaccustomed to caused some slight pain, but that was nothing compared to her experience with the amuse nuts. Her recent training was proving useful. Noble spirits had an incredible aptitude for magic, and their mana pools far exceeded those of humans. It wouldn't last long, but at the moment, Chris could fight as well as any dedicated warrior. Of course, she still didn't think she could beat the phantoms of this vault. The human weakling had ignored Chris's uncertainty, and his departure had been so casual, it was infuriating. He had gone out into that space warped by the treasure vault. To go alone was suicide. He had won against that first phantom, but it was clear to Chris that they were far outmatched. She knew that conflicts were decided by more than just power, but not when the gap was this wide. If they were going to survive this emergency, they would need to cooperate. It certainly wasn't that she was scared or anything. Just as Chris was about to follow after the human weakling, her eyes shot open. She had noticed her. Near Krai's feet was a gold-haired phantom wearing one of those fox masks. This phantom was far more powerful than the previous one and had a presence more overwhelming than any that Chris had ever fought. This meant that the previous phantom, the one whose dissipated mana had been enough to cause France to vomit, wasn't the boss or lieutenant, just a basic mob. Leaning against the relic, Chris commanded her legs to carry her forward. She felt that if she stopped, she would never be able to start moving again. she'd rather press forward than do something so shameful. She couldn't spare any thoughts for the Emperor's safety. Her presence wouldn't do him any good in this vault, so the better option was to work with the human weakling.
I want fried tofu! Give me fried tofu or I'll attack!
It sounded like a joke, but the relic in Chris's hands told her that, unlike the previous phantom, this one meant what she was saying. She didn't know why this phantom wanted fried tofu, but she naturally didn't have any. However, she thought it wouldn't be strange if the human weakling had some. After all, he had packed the ship with food and remained undaunted by the vault.
Krai had been silent, but he broke into a smile when the phantom made its request. Sorry, I don't have any.
Are you shitting me?
Before Chris could add on a sir, it was all over. A gale blew over her. She felt a rush of pain throughout her body and let out a groan. She realized she had been slammed up against the wall. She ached, but her magic strengthening had prevented the damage from being too severe. What Chris had felt was just a shock wave. The phantom had swung its small arm at Krai. No magic had been used. It had been nothing more than a simple movement of a limb. But the phantoms of high-level treasure vaults commanded enough might to obliterate an experienced hunter just by scratching them. Chris coughed violently as she stood up. She saw the human weakling was completely unchanged and the phantom was on the ground.
Wow!
She couldn't believe her eyes. The last thing she had seen before the rush of wind was the phantom attacking. She could accept the attack not having any effect, but she couldn't see how the masked girl had been knocked over. A trickle of blood ran from the phantom's lips and a patch of red spread across her white kimono. Her body of mana material convulsed. Her arms spread out and her fingers shook.
What did you do, sir?
I didn't do anything. There wasn't a drop of blood on his hands. The abilities of the 1,000 tricks were unknown even to his fellow clan members, and veiled in mystery. But this went beyond that. He had done something right before Chris's eyes, and she failed to comprehend it.
Don't hide it from me, sir.
What? No, I'm not hiding anything.
He sounded serious. He didn't look like he was lying. And so it dawned on Chris Argent. He wasn't hiding anything. He kept nothing under wraps, but his abilities defied understanding, just like the work of an advanced magus could boggle the mind of a novice. There's a lot I want to ask you, but for now I just want you to be clear about one thing. Sir, can you defeat this vault's boss?
He knelt down and touched the twitching phantom. No, that's impossible. I had given up on making sense of this. Any hope of comprehension was so far out of sight that I was actually starting to enjoy myself. Chris seemed concerned, but my ignorance left me in no position to address those concerns. The phantom had just gone and coughed up blood on its own. That's how I'd explain it anyway. None of my safety rings had activated at any rate. These phantoms were so tough my friends had been helpless against them during my last visit to this vault. Even if I caught one unaware, I probably wouldn't have been able to leave so much as a scratch on what was essentially a higher being. I knelt down next to the twitching phantom. She appeared to be incapacitated. She wasn't dead, but clearly unable to move. Her face was angled up at me, her mask slightly misaligned. Looking at her, I realized I had seen this phantom before. We met them during my previous visit here. Back then, she had been a bit smaller and had simply demanded something delicious instead of fried tofu specifically. But there was no mistaking the style and color of her hair. Back then, I had handed her some fried tofu. Actually, it was an inari bento that I happened to have on me. It was just something I had picked up in a town we had been staying in not too long prior, but the phantom took quite a liking to it. She had asked for multiple helpings, so I'm not surprised it asked for it again. Oh, I get it now. You forgot our promise, didn't you? Right, our promise. Last time, I had made her promise that if I gave it fried tofu, it would never attack me or my friends ever again. She had agreed to the terms, and then assured me in concrete terms that the phantoms of Peregrine Lodge never lied. The gold-haired phantom's fingers twitched slightly, as though in response to my question. Does this happen a lot? They would collapse if they told a lie. What a tricky bunch of phantoms. Still, they lived up to their promises. The phantom seemed to still be alive. We didn't have any means of killing it, but doing so would probably just invite the wrath of the others. Gods were full of wrath and contempt. Their exchanges were violent. During my previous visit, a phantom had told me that this place was a mirror. It would grant you what you wanted, but it would demand something of equal value in return. It was this facet of Peregrine Lodge that had allowed me to escape once before. You leave me no choice then. I'll show you what I'm capable of. I had grown since our last encounter. My groveling skills back then were a shadow of what they had become. I was second to none at begging for forgiveness.
Weakling.
Her voice brought me back to my senses. I looked around and saw that a swarm of masked phantoms had surrounded me. Not only were they on the floor, they were on the ceiling as well. There were easily more than 100 of them. Our door was cut off, leaving us no way to escape. When I stood up, Chris wavered and leaned against me, our backs pressed together. I let out a small. Being perfectly comfortable, I was afforded the ability to let out a wry grin. We're trapped. Were there always this many? The vulpine sea parted, revealing a tall phantom in a jet black fox mask. He seemed more powerful than the others, but I couldn't be sure of the extent of that power because I was second to everyone when it came to gauging strength. The phantom with the black mask approached us silently, as though he were sliding across the floor.
Welcome. It's been some time since our lodge last saw visitors. Oh, you have nothing to fear from them. They're just struggling to contain their curiosity because they haven't seen a human for so long. I can assure you, you're safe. But in exchange, I'll be taking that which you value most.
That which I value most. I couldn't stop my brow from furrowing when I heard this mandate. I noted the phantom's thin smile. They hadn't made any demands like this last time. It seemed the phantoms had evolved. I felt Chris's heart pounding, but my relic kept me perfectly comfortable. As for what I valued most, that was the lives of my childhood friends. No contest. However, they weren't here with us. The phantom smiled. It seemed he knew what I was thinking.
Ah, what I meant was whatever you value most from what you can currently offer. Oh, and that doesn't include your own life. This is, you see, a fair trade.
When I first came here many years ago, I had never heard of a vault called Peregrine Lodge and naturally didn't know anything of the phantoms that inhabited it. Without meaning to, we had wandered into this vault and a fox of uncanny strength appeared before us.
Errant humans, ye tread upon a domain not your own. How many years have come and gone since we last received your kind? Whatever circumstances ushered your arrival, you are nevertheless unwelcome. However, bow and apologize, and free shall be.
I was the only one who could move. Mana material absorption rates, max capacity, and dissipation rates varied from person to person. Better rates could be considered necessary to being a powerful hunter, but those same qualities made someone easily affected by mana material. Because I was subpar in these areas, Peregrine Lodge only caused me some slight discomfort. Mana material went through me like water through a colander. Back then, I hadn't been perfectly comfortable, but I had done as the phantom said and immediately showed them some exemplary apologizing, and so we were forgiven. That was the moment I learned the utility of the groveling skill. Ever since then, lowering my head became sort of fun, and that shameful behavior earned me punches from Lucia. Our encounter with Peregrine Lodge left a major impression on me. It was this treasure vault that partially numbed me to fear. Not that it made any difference this time, now that I was perfectly comfortable. I'll have to comply. No use fighting. I wonder what this phantom plans to take. The phantom had said he wouldn't take my life, which meant he would go for whatever came after that. And I had no idea what that was. If I said it was my pride and ego, would he forgive me if I groveled? My kowtowing skills had evolved far past what they used to be. I had transformed it into an art. You could make a frontispiece out of it. The phantom came within arm's reach. He lifted an arm, and I unconsciously stepped back. Just as his fingers were about to touch me, they stopped. Then the phantom recoiled. His mouth hung open.
What's this? Are you that incautious, young man?
No, I'm not. That didn't sound like me. Well, now I was perfectly comfortable and all, but I knew when I was in danger. For some reason, the phantom became frazzled. He looked left, then right. Then he leaned in, as though examining me through his holeless mask. Chris squeezed my back.
No, huh? Why are you here? We're in the sky. It hasn't even been 100 years.
Yeah,
How did you get here? We're flying at incredible speeds. I don't understand.
That's what I wanted to know. I clenched my fists. I had the same thought last time, but I didn't think I had done anything wrong. I figured it was their fault, like a carriage hitting a stone on the road. But I couldn't complain to a transcendental being. All I could do was grovel if the situation called for it. It seemed the phantom remembered me. Perhaps it would forgive us if I apologized.
Honestly, how did you slip in here? I thought Mother said we would never see you again as long as we lived. And we even moved to the sky, just to be sure this didn't happen.
Huh? Gods are omnipotent, and therefore bound to their word. The gods of this treasure vault were manifestations of mana material, but maybe that's all any god ever was. It reminds me of something I once heard. A level 10 treasure vault, known as the Shrine of the Celestial God, had formed on the site of the old capital. I don't know if it's true or not, but supposedly the Celestial God themselves was defeated by Ark's ancestor because the god said something that resulted in the restraint of their own powers. The cautious fox phantom led us further into the vault. Throughout the hallway, masked phantoms watched us in silence. Perhaps they didn't attack because of our guide. The interior of Peregrine Lodge still resembled an inn, just like it had during my first visit. The floor was made of wood, and grand wooden pillars reached to the ceiling. Shades of red and white dominated the interior, reminding me of the shrines of some eastern city. Maybe that's where these foxes were originally from.
I know I'm repeating myself, but everyone here is positively fascinated by the sight of humans. You see, we don't get many visitors here, and you, Mr. Caution, are the only one to come twice. It's because of you that my younger sister is so obsessed with fried tofu. I've given up on demanding an apology.
Following behind him was the fried tofu lover in question, but she showed no reaction. Perhaps she was in a rebellious phase.
We're fair and proper. You won't die unless you request it. We won't attack without warning. That greenhorn you killed didn't yet understand our ways. I imagine they didn't understand human speech.
I was beginning to feel like I didn't understand human speech. Hold on, they died? Could this be the first time I've ever killed a phantom? I felt a bit bad about it, but since the phantom brought in on themselves, I hope you'll forgive me. We reached a large vermilion door. The lodge's layout appeared to have remained unchanged. Chris let out a wail and sat down. She had the complexion of someone about to die.
This is normal. What's going on in that head of yours, Mr. Caution?
Hey, I at least realized something's up. I was perfectly comfortable, but perfect vacation didn't hinder my brain functions or anything. I was ready to grovel at any moment. Also, I really wanted him to stop calling me Mr. Caution, but I wasn't in any position to protest. Chris, you wait out here. I'll settle this. Powerful phantoms were composed of incredible amounts of mana material. If standing in front of the door was this hard on her, I was afraid of what might happen if she actually met the phantom face to face. Chris looked up at me. She was breathing short, rapid breaths, and tears were pooling in her eyes like she might vomit at any moment. Don't worry, we're just gonna have a little talk. It'll be fine. And look, I'm perfectly comfortable. At this point, I was close to giving up. These phantoms could blow me away with a mere breath, so I just had to do what I could. If I was lacking a sense of caution, it was because they had stolen it from me. I just want to lay down. In fact, if I make it home alive, that's exactly what I'm going to do. The phantom opened the door. I took a deep breath and began to approach the aberrant god. At that moment, Chris awaited. No, experienced her death. The mana material that flooded from the door was overwhelming, like nothing she'd ever experienced. They were up against a god, the very realm they had entered. Her body refused to move, her instincts accepted defeat, and yet the human weakling was unfazed. Chris was certain he was as feeble as he seemed. Over time, you could learn to glean someone's levels of mana material, and she could at the very least tell that his levels were lower than hers. But while she was failing to even stay on her feet, he was strolling up to the door. Chris couldn't begin to imagine what sort of resilience was required to make that possible, but she was sure that she had now seen what a level 8 hunter was. It was something inhuman, and yet his high level didn't reassure Chris. Beyond that door was a fiend of unbelievable might, but she was still somehow oddly confident that Krai would return. As she lay on the ground, unable to move an inch, the tall fox phantom let out a small laugh and said to her,
"There's no need to worry. That cautionless man obeys the rules so well it's frustrating. In this situation, a noble spirit such as you should be far more concerned about yourself."
My flesh trembled, my soul screamed. Gods are nothing like humans. Putting aside whether authentic gods existed, even if it was just a phantom, this being had the presence of a higher being. Previously, when I wasn't perfectly comfortable, when I was just some no-name, I had kept a grip on my sanity simply because I was already accustomed to feeling the fear of death. Gods or demigods, dragons or demidragons, it made little difference to someone at the very bottom of the hierarchy. All treasure vaults, not just Peregrine Lodge, terrified me. As luck would have it, that was what allowed me to stand in the face of a god, but now I was different. Now I could stand before a god because I was perfectly comfortable. She appeared as a fox with glimmering white fur. Her presence outsized her actual figure, which was much more modest by comparison. Yet that still gave her an outline comparable to that of a dragon. She almost didn't look real. In all likelihood, this fox's body is without a single bit of excess, just like quality crab. Extending behind her was a number of tails, all of them puffy and shimmering. She was a beast, but a god nonetheless. Even if I had my friends with me, defeating her simply wasn't an option. This wasn't anything a human could vanquish.
Ooh, the insatiate human. Hast thou come to challenge me once more?
I wondered if safety rings worked even against higher beings. I had never had the opportunity to test it, but there was no point in thinking about it. If this phantom wanted me dead, there would be nothing I could do about it. Not to brag, but I had more experience stepping on landmines than anyone I knew. For fear of losing my sanity, I avoided making eye contact with the phantom. However, that seemed rude, so I began to boldly grovel. The fox god slapped the ground with her tails, causing the air to tremble. I didn't mean to come again.
Nonsense.
Nonsense indeed. Who had ever heard of someone happening to run into a treasure vault in the sky? But that's what had happened. What type of person would willingly return to a place so inherently dangerous? But I couldn't win an argument with a transcendent being. Her response would make Gark's rage look petty and benign by comparison. Oh, somebody save me, I thought, as I lay there prostrate.
Dost thou remember what I said?
Her voice weighed down on me. I had totally forgotten what she had said, but the tall fox phantom had mentioned it. I searched my memories and answered as honestly as I could. You said we'd never meet again.
I said we shall never meet again, so long as we live.
I wanted to protest and point out that those were the same damn thing. What's the difference? But I was in no position to be voicing contradictions.
This is no coincidence.
Something about the fox's voice was incredibly affecting. But how was this not a coincidence? I couldn't see what else it could be. What's this fox talking? Wait. I've got it. The phantoms of Peregrine Lodge couldn't lie. But bad fortune had turned this one before me into a liar, so she was trying to twist the situation back to her favor. So if I wanted to get on their good side, I just had to go along with them. Man, I'm on fire today. I put on a friendly smile and told them bluntly, You've got that right. This isn't a coincidence. I came here to see you. Perfect, right? No better way to show I had no animosity or intent to harm. Yet, I received a very dramatic reaction.
B.A., do not insult me. I need no pity from a lowly human.
My body was rocked by a roar that nearly uprooted my soul from my body. My hair stood on end, and my heart pounded. It was a miracle that I had survived it at all. I probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been perfectly comfortable. As I stood there, too shocked to move, the fox continued.
Never has a human insulted me as much as thee. Not once do I ever wish to see thy visage again, to compare me to quality crab. The temerity?
So, she had been reading my mind. She seemed pretty mad, but I could hardly blame her for that. But hear me out. Good crab is delicious. It would be even better if it was easier to eat. Of course, my friends always remove the shells for me, which I feel a bit bad about.
Silence! 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 Never have I laid eyes on so hopeless a human as thee. Thou art a testament to the idiocy of man.
The fox slammed her fluffy tails on the ground as she screamed. It sort of reminded me of a child throwing a tantrum. Adorable.
I grow stupider with each passing moment spent in thy presence. Take that, and begone.
You're back, sir.
Once my audience with the fox was over, I left through the door. We hadn't been separated for very long, but I still felt like I was hearing Chris's voice for the first time in a long while. Humans really were the best. Gods make for bad socialization, even if you're perfectly comfortable. Chris supported me when she noticed me wobbling. Then, her eyes went wide when she noticed what I had in my hand.
Oh, what's that, sir?
Oh, want it? In my hands was a bright white tail. It was the real thing grown by the boss herself. Just like last time, it had been foisted onto me even though I said I didn't need it. The last one I had stepped to a rod like a broom and then gave to Lucia, but I didn't know what to do with this one. I wanted to toss it somewhere.
I don't quit that! Get away, sir!
I guess she didn't see it as just a tail. But really, who was supposed to be glad to receive a tail for a present? The tall fox, I'll call him Big Brother Fox, pressed his lips for a moment.
So Mother lost.
No, not at all. Not that I really know what goes on in the head of a god or anything. Ha! I just really pissed her off for some reason. It's, well, sort of hard to interact with someone who can read your mind. And even if she was a god, being despised so thoroughly still left me feeling down.
That tail is her lifeblood. Regardless of how it played out, you won, Mr. Caution.
Lifeblood? This tail was her lifeblood. That boss had 12 tails. Now I had one, leaving her with 11. So if I do this 11 more times, I can defeat her?
Care to give it a try?
Chris hid behind my back when he did that. That just sort of slipped out. Sorry. No, I don't intend to ever come back here. Now tell me, what'll happen to the airship? Last time we had simply been released from the vault, but this time we had an airship with us.
The rules say we must release you unharmed. Your airship or whatever it is will be undamaged. If I had my way, I'd destroy something that could reach us all the way up here. But I can't just do what I want.
Oh, are we actually going to make it out of here? These phantoms couldn't lie. Sure, there had been some rough spots, but getting away from Peregrine Lodge so easily had proven that even I could be lucky at the oddest times. But just as I let out a sigh of relief, Big Brother Fox smiled cruelly.
However, the only one I'm releasing is you. I have no intention of letting the others go free.
What? That's not good. I valued the lives of my friends and I above all else, but that didn't mean I was okay with everyone else dying. I wondered if they'd let us all go in exchange for the tail.
These are the rules, and if I don't receive anything from our guests, Mother will scold me. Now, it's your turn, Chris Argent.
Chris poked her head out from behind my back, but her hands still trembled.
If you want to go free, you'll have to give me whatever it is you value most.
His tone was gentle, but that made him all the more intimidating. And what did Chris value most? We were up in the sky, far from her party, or any other noble spirits. Big Brother Fox was asking for something much more significant than simple groveling, but he was fair in his own way. After all, he didn't ask for our lives, or anything we couldn't offer at the moment. If I was in Chris's position, I'd be ready to offer up just about anything. Even if the Phantom wanted a safety ring, I'd just have to hand it over. But that made me remember something. We had the Emperor with us. What if Chris was asked to hand him over? That'd be bad. If we failed to protect the Emperor, we'd be chased from Zeebrudia. Maybe the Emperor was exempt because he wasn't in the immediate vicinity? No, that wouldn't happen. Big Brother Fox followed his rules. He wouldn't make that sort of exception. He wouldn't take your own life, but he could still be harsh. If a couple wandered in here, someone would end up separated from their lover. Chris didn't say anything. She just gripped my shirt and glared at the Phantom. He stayed quiet for a bit until a frown formed on his lips.
That won't do, Chris Argent. I can't take Mr. Caution because I've already agreed to let him go.
Huh? What was this fox talking about?
What are you talking about, sir?
So she was thinking the same thing I was. Funny how we were on the exact same page. And so we had safely reached the desert country of Tauizant. We had no fatalities, but many injuries, and had time to spare before the conference. A perfect job. All's well that ends well.
I'm going to hit you once I have the strength to.
Casting defensive spells over everyone just as we crashed had drained every bit of her mana. After that crash, my stock had begun to plummet, but Chris's was through the roof. Because she was a noble spirit, everyone in the caravan had kept a respectful distance from her, but they were much more comfortable approaching her. Some of them even openly stated that they owed their life to her. Deep down, Chris was a good person, so she deserved this treatment from the start. I'd have to formally thank Lapis for lending out one of her party members to me, but I still wasn't going to hand over Lucia. Now that we were in Tauizant, our job as guards was over. The civil servants would take over from here. We had experienced our fair share of troubles on this journey. We had some unexpected traders and an encounter with a treasure vault. But think about it. Before I departed, I had said to my vice clan master, no, there might be bandits, there might be monsters, a treasure vault might spring up, there could be a natural disaster. Eva, I could be in serious danger. And look at what happened. We didn't run into any of those. Sure, we had traitors, but we weren't assailed by any bandits. There were dragons, but I didn't have to deal with those. There was a treasure vault, but not a new one. There was a storm, but I don't know if I'd go so far as to call that a natural disaster. Nothing I had mentioned had actually happened. What could that possibly mean? Wait, was luck on my side this time around? No. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're at our most vulnerable when we relax. Something could still happen.
Would you quit it with the bad jokes, sir?
Chris weakly reached for me, her white slender arm entirely bare. For a moment, I wasn't quite sure what she was doing, but then I figured it out. I leaned forward and obediently let her hit me on the head. If Chris was the hero of the day, then the sheet wraiths were the unsung heroes. I headed to the inn designated by Citri. I entered a large bedroom and saw the Lucia wraith collapsed on a bed, glaring at me. She was dressed comfortably, without her usual coat. Her complexion, however, wasn't so great.
You idiot. It appears keeping a ship that large airborne for 300 meters is no easy task. You were so far off course we couldn't just let you land in the middle of the desert.
So Lucia had directed the ship for 300 meters, all while keeping it aloft. I hadn't noticed at all. I had been desperately trying to endure the turbulence. Yeah, I can always count on Lucia. I knew you'd come through. So that was why we had landed so near our destination. It must have been a tremendous strain. But we had my sister to thank for our 0 fatalities. If she hadn't gone to such lengths, some of our injured members probably wouldn't have survived. I sat down on the bed and casually reached for the white ear sprouting from her head and got hit for it.
Stop that.
By the looks of it, if I touched her tail, she'd do a lot worse than hit me.
No amount of mana potions can help Lucy recover after she's absorbed the tail, and she can't remove it until after she's recovered her mana. There are temporary boosters, but those have severe drawbacks.
The tail and ears protruding from Lucia were side effects of the fox god's final tail. After the first encounter at Peregrine Lodge, Citri had investigated the tail and handed it to Lucia. With some training, she figured out how to successfully draw out a portion of the tail's power. She usually kept it affixed to a rod, which she used as a broom, but if she ever ran out of mana, then the tail could provide her with a large supply. I didn't know how she attached the tail to herself, and asking only resulted in flying fists, but it didn't seem like she needed to disrobe to use it. Conscious of her fuzzy ears, Lucia hid them under the covers. Well, take care of her. It seems like things have settled down for the moment. Protection during the conference was apparently going to be handled by a different group, and no matter what happened, I would do whatever I could to avoid asking anything more of Lucia, and that was fine. Even without her, there was still the very energetic Sword Wraith. He was off playing around somewhere, but I knew he would come if I called. We were a party. My friends would be there when I needed them.
You can count on me. This was a very beneficial journey for us as well. Leaving Killiam in your care has made him smarter and stronger.
I still hadn't recovered from the shock of seeing a gaunt Killiam emerge from Sir Killigan's armor. Oh, I just remembered. I've got a present for you, Lucia. The magic wraith squirmed under her blanket, her ears twitching. Here you go. Now you'll have 2 tails. I nodded to myself, then pulled the new tail out from the bag I had brought. Wait, hear me out. The carpet lunged forward and walloped me. As I lay on my back, she punched me over and over again, but being socked by a textile is a painless thing. If anything, it was sort of fun. Being straddled by a carpet was a far crazier experience than the inverse. I said I was sorry. There wasn't anything else I could have done back there. I don't like it any more than you do. It seemed the delinquent carpet resented my decision to give her girlfriend or boyfriend to the fox, but I didn't have any other options. Anyone would have done the same thing in my position. I had a duty to protect the Emperor. And what did you do, besides hide in the back? My protests fell on deaf ears. I didn't even know where a carpet's ears were. She whacked me on the cheek. How tragic that this had to happen just as we had begun to get along. But I was at fault here, so I let the carpet have her way. As I lay on my side, being beaten by a relic, the door opened and Chris came in. She wasn't in her usual robe, but instead in some thin pajamas. I raised my arms, fending off the carpet. Chris looked briefly shocked before a stern look formed on her face.
Human weakling, What are you doing, sir?
You're feeling better? Oh, that's good.
I asked you a question, sir.
I think you should be asking the carpet. The frilly edges of the carpet were whacking against my face. I didn't know of any creature that attacked with their ears, so I figured her ears must be elsewhere. I guess there's nothing more I can do. Playtime's over. All right, I give. I'll buy you a new carpet, one that's real easy on the eyes. The carpet stopped attacking, but remained atop me. I sighed. Okay, fine. You needy textile. To show how sorry I am, I'll buy you 3 carpets. How's that? Will you forgive me? The carpet patted my head a few times and then got off. It seemed her mood had improved. Honestly, she could be really demanding for someone the size of a welcome mat.
Please, quit horsing around, sir.
I know how it looks, but I'm not horsing around. Chris knit her brow and let out a sigh, dispensing with her previous dark expression. I noticed her pale limbs protruding from her pajamas. I thought about how being a forest noble gave her pale skin, but in the desert, there were noble spirits with tan skin. Hell, I knew one Eliza. If Chris spent enough time in the desert, would she get a tan?
Listen to me, human weakling. I'm not your ally, but I've got my orders from Lapis. Anything that sullies your name will do collateral damage to our honor as well, sir.
Very diligent of you, Chris. If all noble spirits were like her, then maybe it was inevitable that they looked down on humans.
We just had a close call, sir. I think we need to discuss that. Don't you agree, sir?
I don't think it was a particularly close call. We made it here just fine.
It was close. You brought 2 traitors into our ranks, sir.
That was, an oversight.
I'm going to hit you, sir. If you've got a good idea to prevent this sort of stuff, I'd love to hear it. Now, do you, sir?
Nope. You know, now that you mention it, I forgot all about Telm and Ketchikaka. They hadn't been aboard the airship after we left. The most likely possibility was that they were still inside the treasure vault. I blinked and tilted my head. Rubbing her temples, Chris sighed with an expression that reminded me a lot of Lucia.
Where are we?
Telm had a long history as a treasure hunter. Once he had become a magus, he'd immediately become a hunter and stayed on that path. After that, he became a fox, which further expanded his wealth of experiences, but something this unnerving was a first for him. He was certain they had jumped from the airship. They had intended to retreat so they could regroup. But when they stepped out that door, they saw something unexpected. The dense presence of mana material made it immediately apparent to Telm that they were in a treasure vault. Not only that, it surpassed any of the level 8 vaults he had entered. He was certain this was no illusion. Even someone as enigmatic as 1,000 Tricks needed time to conjure up an illusion capable of fooling Telm. This also explained why his spells hadn't been working. Entering the treasure vault had made them subject to new laws. They were in dangerous territory, but staying put wasn't an option. Fortunately for Telm, his strengthening spells were still an option. Taking extreme caution, the two of them investigated the building. It was wide, with a high ceiling. They found it unsettling. This was clearly a space designed for humanoids, but they didn't detect any signs of life.
Stay sharp. There should be an exit somewhere.
Kichikaka chuckled in response. The hallway seemed to go on forever and was certainly wider than the airship they had just been on. The space around them was most likely being warped, which wasn't a rare occurrence among high-level treasure vaults. Something strange caught Telm's eye. It was a picture. Decorating the wall was an abstract painting. Telm slowly approached it and took a good look. At first, he didn't understand what all the crisscrossing streaks of yellow were. He narrowed his eyes.
A fox?
Hearing Kichaka's warning, Telm turned and moved away from the painting. Further down the hall, he could see a small human outline. It was a child in a white kimono. It was a phantom. Their face was hidden by a polished white mask modeled after a fox, and the mana material emanating from their body was extraordinary. When Telm realized what he was looking at, an indescribable chill ran through him.
Impossible. Could this really be?
Nine-tailed Shadow Fox, the name of the secret organization Telm belonged to, was derived from a treasure vault. Said vault was host to a vulpine god. Misfortune had brought the organization's founder before something that was once divine. They survived the encounter and went on to name their organization after the being whose might and bearing had enraptured them. They made fox masks their signature item. The mask the founder had brought back from the vault was still used to prove who stood at the organization's top. Kachaka looked nervous, suggesting that he had reached the same conclusion as Telm. It didn't seem possible that they could be here. The vault's location wasn't just uncertain, its very existence was disputed. Telm had heard that the founder had never managed to come across the Vulpine God's domain a second time. Luck alone wasn't enough to bring someone here. Fate had to play a hand. This encounter was the mandate of destiny. Telm hadn't looked away for a moment, yet the fox child had still disappeared without him realizing it. Then he heard a voice behind him.
Welcome, visitors.
Wah.
There's no need to be so wary. We are aware of your circumstances, Telmapocles, Ketchikaka monk, you pitiful humans, cast aside by Mr. Caution.
He had no presence. A young man in a fox mask was standing behind them, almost as if he had always been there. One glance was all it took for the two hunters to understand that they couldn't win here. This was a being far beyond them. Telmus' instincts urged him to step back, and he only barely managed to resist that urge. Let This Grieving Soul Retire by Tsukakage, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website at artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story. It was too soon to abandon hope. A word of advice left by the founder regarding dealing with this treasure vault was to never give up. If there were people who had survived and brought back a mask as proof, there was no reason Telm the Counter Cascade couldn't do the same.
Are you a god?
He could touch it. Many phantoms that looked human also resembled humans on the inside. If that were true here, there should be water inside this phantom. If Telm could directly touch that water, he could manipulate this phantom. This should be well within the realm of possibility for a man who had mastered the control of water. There was nothing else he could do.
You can relax. We're fair here. I'll guarantee your safety, but I'd like to be compensated for it.
Compensation?
I'll be taking what you value most. Fear not, this is a fair exchange. I've already conducted a similar trade with Mr. Caution.
Telm could see openings, dozens through which he could strike. This phantom wasn't watching for potential attacks. The young man saw that his two guests were still on guard. He nodded, then slowly opened his mouth.
I'll take Hydro God's grace and Dragon's reprisal.
Telm broke out in a cold sweat. The phantom was reading their minds. Those relics were central to Telm and Kichachaka's operations, and no known replacements existed for either item. If they were taken, then Telm and Kichachaka would lose any chance of beating these phantoms.
What shall it be?
Suppose I refused.
Telm could reach for the phantom's internal water. If he could just manage that, he could control the phantom, and that would settle this. All it took was one finger. Telm's provocative question brought a simple laugh from the phantom.
Indeed, you certainly have that right. After all, we're very fair.
I received permission to search the airship's crash site for Telm and Kichachaka. The omnipotent Citri Wraith and Killiam Smart, now half its original size, accompanied me. With the conference approaching, Toizant was getting lively. I was seeing more and more knights and magi that appeared to be from other countries. I could feel an undercurrent of tension amid all the excitement. Toizant was a vast country, but not so prosperous. I didn't know much about their history, but I had heard this had once been a land of ceaseless conflict. It was like a slice of hell. Most of the land was a desert climate, with very little rain. What little food the region produced was fought over, and powerful monsters, unique to this region, could be found everywhere. Those days had been brought to an end by the golden age of treasure hunting. Toizant wasn't an optimal land for human habitation, but that climate brought about treasure vaults unlike any other, and the mana material that ran along the ley lines provided a nearly limitless source of energy, giving this land an almost infinite resource, so long as someone was around to extract it. In search of untrodden treasure vaults, hunters flocked to this once poor country, and a number of towns popped up to welcome them. The people of the land stopped fighting and united as one, and that's how this country came to be.
Though it seems only a certain portion of cities are growing, as I expected, food production still makes all the difference. Food is rare in treasure vaults, and importing is difficult with all the monsters.
Sounds tough.
I understand they're planting trees and other greenery, but the results have been less than ideal.
She was supposedly as new to this land as I was, but she was oddly well informed. We left the town. The Black Star couldn't be moved or repaired quickly, so it remained where it had landed. Seeing the ship for the first time in days, the balloon at the top was slightly deflated, and its majesty was gone without a trace. The hull, sticking out of the ground at an angle, had been dug up, but it looked like it had a long way to go before it could be considered fixed. There were guards posted around it, but we had already received permission to enter, so we went ahead and entered through a broken window. The ship was as it was when it had crashed. Before leaving, I had given the interior a sweep and found no signs of Telm or Kachachika. However, I didn't have the sharpest eyes, so I figured something might turn up if I brought Citri here. We also wanted to retrieve the supplies on board. Left like this, the heat would ruin them, and they weren't needed anymore as the Black Star wasn't going to be bringing the Emperor home. Likewise, we had already received permission to retrieve these supplies.
Thank you so much. This country is constantly short of food and potions.
Well, they're your supplies to begin with. Do you think you'll be able to cover your losses?
Of course, all thanks to you, Krai.
Citri's smile stretched to the edge of her face. She really had an enterprising spirit. The two of us, plus Killiam, carefully examined the inside of the ship. Citri's eyes shone as she looked around an airship for the first time. Come to think of it, I'm surprised you guys weren't pulled into the treasure vault.
Well, we tried to get pulled in, but we couldn't gather enough speed.
Huh?
We had been losing speed, you see. When we got close, Luke tried to cut a hole from the outside, but nothing he did had any effect on the vault, and so we couldn't link up with you.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It appears Peregrine Lodge's boundaries aren't marked by physical barriers. If that experience is anything to go off, Luke's sword does not affect opponents that can warp space. He says he'll train more.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. I nodded along, deeply relieved that I hadn't met up with them. If that had happened, what I valued most wouldn't have been a carpet, but rather my friends. I could never have handed them over, which would have left us no choice but to fight the Phantom head-on. Wait, so the reason I could only find Lucia and Citri is because everyone else is off training? Do they have muscles for brains? I suppose Peregrine Lodge is still a bit much for us.
But let me say this, Krai. My preparations were flawless. I even made some considerations for a possible encounter with Peregrine Lodge.
You're incredible, Citri. If she had thought it was a possibility, she should have said something. Maybe I wouldn't have needed to go through all that. Citri seemed to think she had made a mistake, so I patted her on the back. Any mistakes she had made were nothing compared to mine. Citri Wraith's expression softened slightly. She looked at me with upturned eyes and hesitantly asked,
So, Krai, did the fried tofu I packed come in handy?
Huh? Fried tofu? Was there some aboard? I had no idea. It didn't sound like she was joking, and she was fidgeting as though she was hoping for a compliment. Yeah, I should have read the manifest, but who would have expected fried tofu to be among our supplies? I decided to avoid the issue. I rubbed her head, letting her soft hair pass through my fingers. Her droopy eyes became a little less anxious. Yeah, you saved me back there. Really, I mean it. If not for that fried tofu, I would have been in serious trouble.
You used it to escape Peregrine Lodge last time, so I was certain it might come in handy. Oh, I'm so glad. Tofu's not exactly a staple dish in Zebridia, so it took some effort to obtain it.
I couldn't let her realize I hadn't even noticed the tofu. I couldn't do anything that might dampen her smile. Citri's what I value most? That's right, it's Citri. I screwed up here. It's all my fault.
By that way, for future reference, was 5 crates enough?
5? It's hard to say. Was 5 crates really necessary? Was she planning to throw a party or something? As I listened to Citri cheerfully chat away, we looked around the airship. I didn't see Telm, Kechaka, or any sign of what might have happened to them. My initial prediction that they had remained in the vault was looking more and more likely, but if they were in the vault, I didn't have any way of knowing that for sure. Then, my insensitive ears picked up a faint noise. It came from the cargo hold. Normally, this section was for luggage, but the vast majority of it ended up being used to store the food I had brought. It certainly didn't make for a good hiding spot. Citri slowly drew her relic water gun, and Killiam raised its slim arms in a fighting stance. I had the safety rings, so I took the lead. I opened the door and peeked inside. The cargo hold hadn't changed much since I last saw it. Unlike the luggage in the other rooms, the boxes here had been fastened down just in case. The gratuitous mountains of crates were sturdy and wouldn't collapse easily. I took a few cautious steps in. I looked around but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Maybe the sound had come from outside. Everything's all right. It looks like it was just our imaginations. The first thing I saw was a white triangle. Once the lid was removed, a small figure stood up. Before me was a girl in a white kimono and a fox mask. In her hands was a large cut of fried tofu. I simply blinked in confusion. Use some chopsticks. Eating with your hands is bad manners. The phantom looked at me and calmly munched on her tofu. Smiling, I approached the box, pressed her head down, and replaced the lid on the crate. Taking deep breaths, I hoisted up the crate. Wooden crates weigh a bit, but that was all I felt. No additional weight from the contents. And that's because it was empty. There was absolutely nothing at all in this crate. All clear. Should we take these crates outside? Maybe 5 crates wasn't enough? Maybe that had been a heat-induced mirage. Or maybe stress was to blame. This called for a cool drink and playing with the carpet. I just wanted to quickly get our supplies and get out.
A captive, Krai, you never cease to amaze me. I could never manage a feat like this.
Uh-oh, Citri's reeling. And what do I do with this? Why is the sister here?
While I was hoping for a captive fox, I meant a criminal, not a phantom.
Sure, but it wasn't my doing that had brought this phantom from her vault. I felt rumbling from inside the crate. It sounded like Little Sister Fox. I didn't know her name, so I was calling her that for convenience's sake. Was gorging herself on fried tofu. Citri almost always wore a smile, but even she looked grim. And I still didn't have a clue what I was supposed to do about this little fox. The phantoms of Peregrine Lodge weren't something that could be taken lightly. Most phantoms didn't leave their vaults because they couldn't survive long on the outside, but that sort of common sense apparently had nothing to do with this fox girl. Maybe if Lucia uses the tail, she could do something? Like, if she had fox ears, this phantom might think they're kin or something.
I think you would just be asking her to punch you. If it's just one, we might be able to take it down if we all work together.
The sun was beating down on us. Heat waves warped the surrounding scenery. The box was awfully calm, considering that we were talking about killing the phantom inside. Yeah, I'm not sure I can kill something that doesn't mean any harm. I'm coming up empty.
Indeed. I could try tossing her in the blender, but that might just break it.
Huh. What's a blender?
I'm conducting experiments that involve grinding down phantoms into liquid mana material. Typically, they dissipate into the air.
Sorry. I think I've got the idea. Of the 2 little sisters, the smart one was far more dangerous. The way I saw it, the quickest resolution was to have Peregrine Lodge take her back. We turned down an inconspicuous alley where I set the box down. I braced myself and slowly opened the crate. I prayed that the contents had vanished at some point. But inside was a phantom quietly hugging her knees. She didn't have the ears or tails of a beast. At first glance, she just looked like a person in a mask, but her presence wasn't anything like that of a human. I took a deep breath and asked her, "Hey, are you able to contact Peregrine Lodge? And why are you here in the first place? This makes no sense. Take your tofu and go home." Little Sister Fox didn't say anything, but after a moment she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small green board about the size of a small notebook. It was smooth and numbers appeared when she touched the black surface. It seemed to be displaying the time. My eyes flew open. I recognized this thing. I knew what it was. That's a smartphone. A telephone relic.
A telephone? Like what you talk through. It doesn't look anything like it.
Telephones were a communication device used in technologically advanced countries. They were still in the experimental stage and there were a number of obstacles, preventing them from becoming common in the empire, but they were like a sounding stone that could be used to contact multiple locations, and the smartphone was an item from the era of physical arms that had similar functions. Well, it's a relic after all. With these, every terminal has its own number. You enter the number of the desired terminal, and you can talk to them over long distances.
But you can only contact people who own the same relic, and you also have to know their number?
Right. So it's less practical than a sounding stone, and yet these things sell for a lot among devoted enthusiasts. What's more, they were an odd strain of relics with a number of defects. For instance, they couldn't be used far from towns. It would say no service, and they would break if dropped or submerged in water. Though I wanted a smartphone, there was no point in buying one because none of my friends had one. I didn't know why Little Sister Fox had one, but Peregrine Lodge's origins might have been in the era of physical arms.
You're very well informed, Krai.
She was looking at me with admiration, but I didn't really know much about these things. Still, the adoring gaze didn't feel half bad, so I couldn't stop myself from showing off. This, I believe, is a new model. These newer versions have cameras. It's small, but comes with plenty of features.
I see. What sort of features?
They were only rumors, but I had heard that there were a variety of smartphones that didn't all do the same things. But I had heard they could do most things, like a magic staff. The cameras can shoot magic beams that mow down monsters, and, right, they can also keep food cold. The people of the era of physical arms use their smartphones to protect themselves, making them very useful in their daily lives. They're really a versatile relic.
They can do anything. What about, say, something like marriage?
Yeah, probably. Little Sister Fox suddenly moved, snatching the relic from my hands. She silently tapped at the screen and then handed it back to me. Calling, it said on the screen. Her movements had been so efficient that it was almost beautiful. It was cool. Whoa. Are you a smartphone pro or something? You've got the better of me here. I'll have to get my own sometime soon.
You hick! How embarrassing and...
Her voice was flat, but her neck was flushed and her body trembling. Darn, it sounds like he's not coming to get you. When I told Little Sister Fox the outcome of my conversation with Big Brother Fox, she didn't seem bothered in the slightest. It seemed Big Brother Fox was very busy at the moment. When he heard my voice, he said, He had sounded incredibly upbeat when he told me that he finally had some proper intruders. Those intruders were Telm and Kichichaka. By the sound of it, those two weren't doing so well. That gave me one less thing to worry about. I guess he prefers a hands-off approach. Maybe phantoms and humans have different sensibilities. He didn't even ask me to look after his sister or anything. He said the matter of the carpet was his loss, but he didn't come off as angry about it. Yeah, I was pretty sure phantoms saw the world differently from us. While I was worrying about all this, the little phantom casually opened a bag and removed some fried tofu. The inside of the crate was filled with discarded paper wrappers. She danced to her own unfathomable, otherworldly tune. Oh, is fried tofu even common in the Empire?
It's not.
Little Sister Fox froze, a partially eaten block of tofu falling from her hands. Of course it wasn't common. Citri seemed to have managed to find some, but I couldn't think of many countries where it was a common dish. I began to wonder what would happen to this phantom once she ran out of tofu. And why don't you just go home already? You can fly, can't you? If you can't, then... I've got it. Lucia didn't want the new tail, so maybe you can fly if you use that. It'll be 2 birds with 1 stone. I was just tired and I felt like an idiot worrying about this. Just as I was thinking I was ready to pack my bags and go home, I felt a tug on my shirt. I turned and saw Little Sister Fox holding on to me. She wasn't saying anything, but her pitiful state was obvious enough. Not that that made me any more suited for looking after a phantom. What sort of phantom has a weakness for fried tofu? Go find the fried tofu kingdom or something. She reached into her pocket. When her hand came out again, she was gripping a silver board, another smartphone. Could she be a dual wielder? As I stood there in amazement, she held the second relic before me.
Take it!
I felt a sense of shame that dwarfed mountains and sank deeper than the sea. Remember, Krai Andre, you're a hunter. Saving the weak is one of your jobs. She was a phantom, but not a bad one. I felt sorry for her, now that she had stumbled into the human world. I thought hard about a way to make everyone happy. I was certain there had to be one. Now was the time for me to awaken those slumbering powers of mine. I placed the smartphone in my pocket, resisting the urge to fiddle with it.